Delegates, I call Congress to order. Many thanks again to Rui and George, who've been playing again for us this afternoon. Thank you. Congress, we do have photographers in the hall using flash photography, and some of our videos include effects that may impact on some delegates. We do also start each session with a film, and I will give fair warning when other films will be shown, including this afternoon when we will see a film celebrating our anti-racism work. Once again, we are starting this session with a short film of Union Wins. Again, be prepared to make some noise.
campaigned long and hard for greater protection for retail workers. And while the Tories dithered and delayed taking action, Labour listened and pledged to introduce a law to make it a specific offence to assault a retail worker, pushing the government into action.
Well, I think USDAW made the most noise then, so there's a bit of a challenge for the rest of you. Congress, we move to section 2 of the General Council reports, Building a Fairer Economy, from page 18. I now call paragraph 2.1 and 2.2. And I call Composite 4, Building a Fairer Economy. The General Council supports the Composite to be moved by Unite, seconded by RMT, supported by Accord and CWU. I call Unite.
Thank you. Sharon Graham, Unite, moving Composite 4. Friends, it's been said in this room, but let's make absolutely no apology for saying it again. Let's celebrate the first TUC conference in 14 years without the cloud of the Tories hanging over us. And friends, as we reflect on those 14 years, we should never forget what was served up to workers and our communities. 14 years of austerity, 14 years of privatisation and profiteering, and 14 years of billionaires and food banks. And of course, let's not forget the old blame games. A billionaire Prime Minister accusing migrants in small boats crossing the channel of being responsible for our decline. That is a lie. So friends, it is good to be rid of them. It's good to be rid of them. But to fix our broken nations, we're going to need to do more than just move round the deck chairs. Leadership is about choices, and different choices now need to be made. Labour needs to make different choices, and change needs to mean change. Friends, Labour will get one shot. They'll get one shot, because we know the gateway to the far right is waiting in the wings. Workers and communities, they are hurting, they are on their knees, and they cannot pay the price again for crisis after crisis that they did not create. When city bankers crashed the economy in 2008, it was everyday people who suffered. They lost their homes, their jobs, and their long-term security. But make no mistake that the champagne in the city, it kept flowing, whilst the devastation of austerity hung like a noose around the necks of our communities. And then when COVID struck, it was workers who faced it down. Bus workers, bin workers, supermarket workers, NHS workers, many paying with their lives. And what followed for those workers? Pay cut after pay cut after pay cut as profit margins soared. So friends, we are now at the end of the line. The economy is truly broken. With the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. Our workers and our communities paying the price time after time. This must stop now. And friends, of course, I'd be the first to say it. Labour have signalled some good things. Of course they have. But the economic path that they are on is simply wrong. How can a Labour government remove the winter flu allowance from pensioners whilst the top 50 richest families in Britain are worth £500 billion? How have they left those people untouched while pensioners, their pockets have been picked? Friends, we need a wealth tax now. Friends, The top 1%, the top 1% in Britain, just giving 1% more, would create £25 billion. The so-called black hole gone. What is wrong with that being the choice? There is money. There is money in our society. We are the 6th richest economy in the world. We do not need to pit pensioners against workers. We can and must make different choices. Labour can and they must make different choices. From cradle to the grave, workers and our communities need to see whose side they are on. And friends, we just cannot wait for growth. We simply do not have time. Britain led the first industrial revolution. And as we sit here in the 4th, we are not even off the starting blocks. We cannot be locked into a spiral of doom, too slow to invest, too cautious to grab the opportunity. The talk of green transition, few disagree. But where are the jobs in this transition? Who's going to build the turbines? Who's going to make the batteries? Who is going to benefit from AI? Friends, you look at Germany. They've got a green transition pot worth £580 billion. And we've got a wealth fund of £7.3 billion. It's a joke. If we're serious about fixing the economy, it is going to take money. Oil and gas workers cannot wait. Automotive workers cannot wait. And this movement cannot agree to a jobless transition, where industry after industry become the coal miners of our generation. Investment in British industry needs to start now. And friends, Labour must ditch the phony fiscal rules. They are self-imposed. These fiscal rules have been changed 9 times since 1997. There is no gold badge for reducing our debt over one parliament. That is a choice being made. So as we welcome Labour to power, they need to make it count. We have to make them make it count, because being in the room is not going to be enough. So friends, workers and their families need to see tangible change. So let's make it really clear from this hall today: no to cuts, no to austerity Mark II, and yes to a wealth tax. Let the voice of workers be heard. Let real long-term change be here for the long term. Let's call on Labour to put their arms around the working class and be Labour. Solidarity, I move.
Call the RMT to second.
Good afternoon. Mick Lynch, National Union of Rail, Maritime and Transport Workers, seconding Composite 4. Britain's economy needs investment. Our economy, our infrastructure, our communities too. We've had a continuous austerity regime, and now we need a Labour recovery and the creation of a fair economy that works for our people. This is not an overnight job, and we don't think an election solves all the problems. But this country is in trouble with our society hollowed out by austerity and 4 decades of pernicious Thatcherite economics. Labour relying on growth alone will not deliver the investment we need to fix our broken country. So let's be clear. In adopting this resolution, the TUC calls on Labour to bring a significant real terms increase in public spending and investment with progressive taxation. We cannot balance the books by cutting off the heating for our pensioners. Labour has to find a better, fairer way. To fix our economy, our NHS, our infrastructure and our communities, we cannot rely on the current fiscal strategy. Tory austerity should not set Labour's agenda. They have to do better than that, not to be bound by Tory policies. As we are, Labour has not allowed itself enough economic scope to address the country's needs. We need a fair and progressive tax system to provide a fair economy that works for all people. Tax on unearned wealth in order to build services and infrastructure. We welcome the Labour Party's early initiatives on resolving disputes on the New Deal and public ownership of rail. But we call out the misstep of punishing pensioners on the winter fuel allowance, which breaches Labour's promise to end austerity. Rachel Reeves, we call on you to think again. The TUC needs to campaign effectively to win the argument for progressive ideas under a Labour government, for an economy that works for working people, to end austerity and to move to a new era of a fair economy. Our message must be from this Congress: we can't stick to the Tory economic rules, because that means the Tories still rule the economy. We don't want to meet the new boss to find their ideas and policies are the same as the old boss. This resolution sets out a new and vital position for our movement. We welcome the Labour government, the moves to end the disputes, the New Deal for workers, but we need a fairer distribution of wealth and an economy that works for everyone. The super rich can pay more. A fair economy will not attack pensioners and deprive them of their heating, and nor should this Labour government. So please support the resolution, and let's have a Labour movement committed to a programme of economics that's based on progressive ideas and a society geared in favour of redistribution, working for the many, not the few. Please support.
Thank you, Mick. I call the supporters, I call Accord first.
President, Congress, Jen Winning of Accord, speaking in support of Composite 4 and building a fairer economy. Congress, these past 14 years of Conservative failure have left the country grappling with crumbling infrastructure and inadequately funded public services. We are only just emerging from a cost of living crisis which squeezed the disposable incomes of ordinary workers and led to deteriorating living standards. However, not everyone is struggling. The average FTSE CEO now earns more in an hour than the average worker does in an entire year. And since the financial crash, dividends have grown more than 3 times faster than wages. And it has now been confirmed that supermarkets have used the cost of living crisis to line their own pockets, increasing their profits by 160%. In short, wealth is being rewarded, but work is not. And what's worse, under our flawed system, this expanding wealth is not being taxed fairly. This must be addressed. We all know that a strong and growing economy is a prerequisite for funding decent public services and fairly rewarding our public service workers. But a fair tax system is critical to that too. The provision of high-quality public services, including the welfare support, relies on the fair taxation of people and companies, as well as an expanding economy. Who pays tax and how much they contribute are political choices. They have a direct impact on our essential public services and our wider infrastructure. These choices impact directly on fairness and the cost of living for working people too. Now, in this composite, we at Accord, along with our colleagues in Unite, RMT and the CWU, have proposed a roadmap to rebalance the economy to create a better future for us all. I support this composite and I ask you to support it too. Thank you.
Thank you. I call CWU.
President, Congress, Karen Rose from the CWU, rising to support Composite 4. Congress, the CWU welcomes the election of a Labour government and the end to the 14 years of Tory rule. The Conservatives have done such untold damage to this country leaving workers, our communities and our industries worse off than ever. This country has been left in a complete mess. However, if we want to fix it, we can't replace austerity with more austerity. At a time when our public services are literally crumbling in front of our eyes, a system of fair taxation could provide the funds that our schools and hospitals so badly need. The TUC's research shows that a modest wealth tax on the wealthiest, 1%, could raise billions for the Treasury to help to provide a real terms increase in public spending and investment. But this is only one part of the solution. We must empower trade unions to achieve sectoral-level collective bargaining agreements that cover thousands of workers across the sectors of the economy. We welcomed Labour's commitment to introducing fair pay agreement in the care sector, and now that we finally have a Labour government, we want to see this rolled out across both the public and private sectors. Some in Parliament may be hesitant to call for sector-wide agreements, but a Labour government should not be afraid of big ideas. Under the last Labour government, introducing a minimum wage was one of those big ideas. Businesses claimed that introducing the minimum wage would bankrupt our economy and lobbied against it, but now it would be unthinkable not to have it. Sectoral collective bargaining is one of those big ideas. We know that it works. Countries that have strong sectoral level agreements have the most robust workers' rights in the world. This is key to the unlocking of the growth that the lone Labour government is so focused on, and it's our job as trade unions to push them into introduce new sectoral collective bargaining agreements across our economy to fix our crisis of inequality. The CWU wholeheartedly supports this motion, creating a fairer economic settlement for all and introducing robust standards for workers everywhere. Support a fair system of taxation, support trade union power, and support this motion. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I call some additional speakers. Equity to be followed by the NEU.
President, comrades, Congress, Paul Fleming from Equity. Comrades, we all welcome the election of the Labour government earlier this year, and their election has brought an offer of change and of hope, but it has raised as many questions as it has had answers. One of those big questions is, what did tough choices mean? Well, now we know. It means pushing pensioners into penury and keeping children in poverty. But at what point do those austerity choices change? And what vision do we have as a movement for what the economy looks like afterwards? It is irrational to think that the same economic choices of the last 14 years and the same economic structures of the last 40 will produce a different outcome from that which we have now. Congress, let me tell you a tale of two sectors. On one hand, we have the sector of TV and film. 95% of it made on a trade union collective agreement. 80% of the artists you see on screen and on stage are members of their union. We are a union of 50,000, of which the majority are under 40. They are covered almost exclusively by sectoral collective bargaining. This sector is worth £3.5 billion a year to the British economy in inward investment alone. That is an extraordinary success story. And billions of pounds of tax credits are poured into the pockets of the workers in those unionised industries. Let me tell you of another sector, video games. Britain is the second largest producer of video games on the planet. We've put over £1.2 billion of taxpayers' money in tax credits alone into it over the last 10 years. And the consequence, not a single operating sectoral collective agreement. The largest recipient, Microsoft. That's where that money is going, straight back into the bank accounts of billionaires and not into the pockets of the working people that create one of Britain's great economic success stories. That is the challenge that the Labour government has in front of them, to restructure the economy to make sure that subsidies, that tax credits only go to unionised workforces. That is a critical part of any kickstart of an economy that is desperate for growth. If you're focused on growth, you focus on the areas we do well, and the creative industries is one of them, worth more to the economy than banking. For every pound that is spent in theatre and live performance, it injects between £5 and £8 back into a local economy. But without sectoral bargaining, what do we mean by a local economy? Is it a chain restaurant, an ununionised hotel? Is it a pub that oppresses their workers and doesn't even choose furlough as an option during a pandemic? It should be the wealth that is being created by our members, generated pound for pound, 5 times the government investment should be going back into the pockets of your members, in hospitality, in transport and in retail. That is a critical demand, and that's what sectoral bargaining means. We still have a lot of questions about what Labour's laser-like focus on growth looks like, but the biggest and clearest, quickest plan is this, the New Deal for working people. We must not be told a boss's narrative that this is what will cost and limit growth. In fact, it is what will deliver it. So, comrades, I leave you with Equity's motto, to all artists, good work, to all workers, good art, and to all people, equity.
Thank you. I'm going to call the NEU, and I'm afraid I won't be able to take any more speakers in this debate. Okay, I'm going to move to the vote then. I put Composite 4 to the vote. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? That carries, thank you. I now call paragraph 2.3 and I call Composite 5, Industrial Strategy, National Security and a Workers' Transition. The General Council support the Composite motion to be moved by Unite, seconded by GMB, supported by Aegis and Nautilus. Unite.
Cliff Bowen, moving the Composite on behalf of Unite the Union. Congress, the future of over 30,000 oil and gas jobs across the North Sea hangs in the balance. This crisis is urgent. Environmental action is required, but exporting jobs, skills and destroying working class kids' futures while moving production abroad is just burying our heads in the sand. It will be the greatest industrial test of Labour in government. It will be the biggest test of Keir Starmer's mettle. He must prove the difference a Labour government can make. Congress, it will be the biggest test of our ability to make them do the right thing. We should be under no illusions as to what will happen if we get this wrong. Enough of us in this room remember the fate of the miners only 40 years ago. Even those too younger to remember it directly have had to live with the consequences ever since. Hundreds of thousands of workers in their communities were left on the scrap heap after the closure of the pits. The consequences haunt villages and towns across the country to this very day. Congress, this is the cliff edge that tens of thousands of workers in the North Sea face today. We know what it will take to avoid that fate. Not misty-eyed promises, not jargon about accelerating the transition with no substance, not false promises of green jobs which never seem to materialise in time. We demand a real industrial strategy built on the expertise and experience of oil and gas workers themselves. This is the greatest challenge in energy in our lifetimes. The world of energy is changing, but with it, we also have the greatest of opportunities. We can show the world what a just transition should look like, taking the 200,000 skilled workers who support UK oil and gas production and their communities across the country with us, and in the process, revitalise UK manufacturing. A just transition with them, not one that is done to them. We need a plan backed up by, in our estimates, £6.6 billion over the next 6 years. The cost of such a plan is nothing compared to the benefit of giving working class communities a future and the economic boom of £12 billion in expected tax receipts. Congress, we need to see real commitments to creating these jobs now. We mean jobs which defend and value the skills and experience that our members have worked hard to earn. We mean union standard apprenticeships to bring young workers into these industries, because oil and gas workers' skills are the skills needed to work in these new decarbonised and clean energy activities on our journey to net zero. And be under no illusion, these workers' skills are sought after all over the world. The North Sea has always been a net exporter of talent for the oil and gas world. And if these workers see no future in the UK for their skills, they will go work away and work abroad, because the whole world knows we are going to need fossil fuels for the foreseeable future. Well, everyone, it seems, except the current government. And when these workers go, they will not be coming back. We mean jobs with terms and conditions mapped to guarantee every new job is like for like or better than those they replace. Congress, this is not just a single industry issue. A plan for the North Sea must be the foundation for an entire industrial strategy, one which includes our utilities and manufacturing base, as well as chemicals, pharmaceutical, processed textiles and glass, amongst others. This is why we also demand a strategy that includes the entire energy network, one which reduces household bills and strengthens national security. Such a plan must also commit to infrastructure projects like Sizewell C and small modular reactors, which support manufacturing and construction jobs. In Congress, we need a grown-up conversation of the future of our refineries and what the future of green fuels can look like. What is the art of the possible for the 6 UK refineries and the workers and communities that they support across the UK? In an uncertain world, increasing our reliance on imports while exporting jobs and money for the Exchequer is the wrong path. It is absurd and naive to think otherwise. The world will continue to need fossil fuels, and if we continue down the path charted by our government, then the path to net zero will end up as a path to nowhere. Congress, our demand is simple. No ban without a plan. 5 clear words, but they form the basis for the most important industrial transformation of this generation. Energy security, skilled jobs for our communities, investment for the country, and a sustainable future for our kids. Choose a homegrown energy transition. Stand with us. Show Starmer and Miliband we mean business. Support this composite.
Thank you. A call on the GMB to second, please.
Good afternoon, Congress. Martina Vražitoru, GMB. It's an absolute honor to be here today, standing in solidarity with each and every one of you in seconding this motion. As a trade unionist, we see the reality of what happens when industries are allowed to decline, when the jobs that sustain communities and families slip away. The workers in steel, gas, chemicals, water, and manufacturing, our brothers, sisters, and comrades, know that their livelihood depends on one another. In one industry collapses, others are at risk, and it's the workers, not the CEOs and not the shareholders, who suffer. For decades, we have felt the pain of neoliberal policies gutting our industries. Profits offshored, jobs exported, and communities left behind. We've seen the heartache of skilled workers who want nothing more than to contribute, to build, to be part of something bigger, as they are condemned to precarious, low-skill, low-wage, low-prospect jobs. But we have the opportunity to turn all that around. The Labour government has the chance and holds the power necessary to end the neglect of our industrial base and to replace the chaos and waste of free market economics with a planned approach to industry and manufacture that puts people at the center. And when I say people, I mean all people. This is the time for inclusion and opportunity for all. Sizewell C is that opportunity. This project is not just about energy, it's about creating thousands of jobs, good unionized jobs, that can uplift entire communities. It's about giving women who are so often underrepresented in construction and energy a fair shot at being part of the future workforce. Let me be clear, we are not just building a nuclear power plant, we are building a more inclusive and equitable workforce, one where everyone can thrive. When we talk about industrial strategy, we are talking about national security. Not just the security of our borders or our energy supplies, but the security of all our people. The ability of working families to put food on the table, to have hope for the future, to feel that they are valued members of society that prioritizes their well-being. This means ensuring that decarbonization is not something done to workers, but something led by them. We need to be the ones at the forefront of this change, showing that the shift to greener energy can and must be driven by those workers who have powered our industries for generations. This is our opportunity to make things right, to ensure that our industrial strategy is not just about profits and politics, but about people, working families, and communities. So, Congress, let's build Sizewell C, let's invest in our energy, our industries, and most importantly, in our people. Let's create a future where everyone has the opportunity to contribute, where no worker is left behind, and where unionized, inclusive jobs are at the heart of everything we do. I second this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Aegis. Aegis to speak, please. Oh, easy.
President, Congress, Brian Lynn, Aegis the Union, supporting Composite 5. Aegis agree and fully support everything Unite and GMB have just said so far on this composite, so I'm not going to repeat it all. I would like to focus in on Labour's National Wealth Fund proposal. Labour will reward clean energy developers with a British jobs bonus, allocating up to £500 million a year from 2026 to incentivise firms who offer good jobs, good terms and conditions, and build their manufacturing supply chains in our industrial heartlands, coastal areas and energy communities. This is all very good, but Labour need to go a step further and make sure they work in partnership with trade unions on this. After all, this is £500 million of taxpayers' money. It's our pay as you earn. We think the TUC and the unions should have a say in what criteria is used to decide which companies deserve these incentives. We want to make sure that workers get their fair share of these incentives, not the CEOs and the executives. So here's a simple yet important suggestion. Top of the list of criteria to qualify for incentives or bonus should be the answer to this question. Do you have a recognition agreement that supports collective bargaining with an independent trade union affiliated to the TUC? If the answer is no, do one. And they can go and get one. There's a list of trade unions on the TUC website. Aegis are at the top of that list. If Labour are handing out incentives to companies, the only way we can be confident that workers receive their fair share of these bonuses is if the trade unions are involved and recognised and their voice is heard. Conference, please support this composite.
Thank you, Brian. I call Nautilus.
President, Congress, Martin Gray, Nautilus International, supporting Composite 5. I'm going to keep it very specific to the elements that we sought for inclusion in our amendment which surround the Merchant Navy. And you'll have heard me talking a lot of ship today. Extra enunciation on the last bit. So it is of critical importance that we get the message out there. 90% of world trade is moved by sea. It is responsible for 3% of global emissions. It's the emissions of some large developed nations. It is such a big impact on the world that supporting a just transition in maritime and shipping is essential to supporting decarbonisation efforts around the world. But of more vital and critical importance in the UK is the support that it has for strategic national defence. How can we stand as an island nation if we cannot get goods, fuel, food, medication in from where we need it to this country? How can we have a comprehensive industrial strategy unless we have shipping that supports that? How are we going to plan for an industrial future where this country makes things, exports things, and is a global powerhouse once more in manufacturing when we cannot then transport that ourselves? So revitalisation of shipping, of the Merchant Navy and of, in particular, the UK Ship Register and UK seafarers is of vital importance to delivering a comprehensive industrial strategy and dealing with the crisis that is in industry in this country and growing the UK economy. Thank you. Please support this motion.
Thank you. I will try to take a number of speakers for this debate. Call NASUWT.
Thank you. Good afternoon, President, Congress, Ava Verrier, NSUWT Teachers Union, speaking in support of Composite 5. And I just want to focus particularly on point C of the Composite and say that we must secure an ironclad promise from the Labour government that any company or organisation receiving government funding in any sector must have a trade union recognition agreement in place. Colleagues, let's be clear. Government funding is our money. It's money that comes from the working class, coming from our taxes. So why can't this money be used to secure better working conditions, safer workplaces, and collective bargaining rights? These are basic principles that trade union recognition agreements can guarantee, and they should be non-negotiable when establishments benefit from public funds. Take education, for instance. We have multi-academy trust and free schools happily receiving government funding but refusing to negotiate with us, and some even go as far as to bar us from holding union meetings on site. This is unacceptable, and it's something that we should not have to tolerate. Why should we stand by and allow these organisations to take public money while denying workers the basic right to unionise and collectively bargain for better conditions? Our members in these establishments deserve better, and Labour needs to show they're serious about delivering a new deal for working people. And it's high time that we called on the TUC to demand that the Labour government ensures every workplace benefiting from public funds is required to have a trade union recognition in place. And this is a fight for fairness, for respect, and the working class. Colleagues, please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Unison.
President, Congress. Joe Tapper from Unison, first-time delegate, first-time speaker. Speaking against Composite 5. Congress, Unison fully supports the need for a fair transition to renewable energy, and this includes the need for a comprehensive plan for jobs, skills, employment opportunities, and pension protections for workers and communities in current fossil fuel industries. We have our own members in this sector, and we will fight for them and their livelihoods, just as we will stand in solidarity with our sibling unions and fight for yours. Unfortunately, Congress, we do, however, have to oppose Composite 5. Workers in the energy sector rightly expect to be heard and protected, but climate change doesn't only impact on energy workers. Unison and its members have very clear policy for a rapid and just transition away from fossil fuel energy. Climate change is a class and trade union issue, and when we say class, we mean the whole of the working class. Congress, there are no jobs on a dead planet. Livelihoods are already being endangered and destroyed by climate change, both here and in the global south, where its impacts are being felt most painfully right now, and our fellow workers are paying with their very lives. Unison is a proudly internationalist union, and we cannot stand by and let the most vulnerable suffer while we use continued fossil fuel production as a bargaining chip in what is set to be a catastrophic global game of chicken. The International Energy Agency has warned that fossil fuel demand must fall by at least 25% in the next decade if governments want to limit the rise in global warming. It's already too much. I never thought I'd be holding my own employer to account on health and safety protections for security guards in my workplace for days when the temperature reaches over 40 degrees Celsius. We can't avert the crisis at this point, only lessen it for future generations. Jobs and communities can and should be protected by the opportunities created by the rapid expansion of renewables. There will be hundreds of thousands of jobs needed to combat the climate emergency, and we need skilled, well-paid and unionised workers for these new jobs. We heard from our General Secretary earlier today that this is a moment of opportunity, so let's seize it. I've spent the whole of my adult life under the Tories, and I agree with my RMT comrade from earlier. We don't want the cake, we want the whole damn bakery, and as trade unionists, we know you don't ask, you don't get. So this conference is our opportunity to send a message to the new Labour government about the trade union movement's demands on climate. The money's there, we've just heard about it. We're the sixth richest country in the world, the richest 1% of people in the UK own the same wealth as 80% of the rest of us, and the shareholder profits of energy companies have skyrocketed. So let's stake our claim for the future and just transition that we need and tell Labour to be bold, be radical and fund a just transition through progressive taxation. We don't just hope for the future that we want, we organise. So Congress, let's continue to fight for a rapid and just transition. But that does mean opposing fossil fuels and opposing this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I call UCU.
Thanks, President Chair. Sean Vernell, UCU, speaking in opposition to this motion, and I agree with the United speaker. I do welcome this debate, and we really do desperately need a grown-up conversation because it is about the planet and jobs, and I really want to argue they're not two separate things, separate campaigns. They go hand in hand. But I think the first thing we in UCU would like to put across here, we have to identify who is the main enemy when it comes to this debate. And it's not the environmental movement. The environmental movement is not the problem. Those who campaigned for a just transition, who've been imprisoned, the school students who've been on strike and so on and so forth, all these people have alerted us to the dangers of ecological crisis are not the enemy. And I'm not really sure how useful it is in the 40th anniversary of the great strike of 1984-85 miners' strike to describe energy workers today as the net zero miners. And I think about this, I am getting older, but my memory could be fading. But when the Thatcher government and when the Ian McGregor went for the miners in 1984-85, it wasn't on the basis of defending a better environment. It was on the basis of shutting down uneconomic pits, profitability, the beginnings of neoliberalism. The workers in Port Talbot who face job losses are doing so not because their bosses give a toss about the environment. They're doing so because they care about their profits. And that's why they're sacking people. And that's why I think we have to aim and be clear who the main enemy is here, not the environmentalists, but as usual, what all unites us is those greedy employers who want to put the needs of themselves and their profits before the working class people right across the globe. The motion talks about geopolitical, because of the geopolitical situation, we cannot abandon fossil fuels. Now, I think the word abandon here is a rather strange word. I mean, because, it's as if somehow we actually do need fossil fuels. But fossil fuels are the key reasons, one of the key reasons why we have an ecological crisis today. And therefore, the failure to recognise that will undoubtedly lead to more conflicts, more food, water, land destroyed, big heating up the world, famine, wildfires, and more displaced populations across the globe. Of course, and I absolutely do agree with those speakers who say we need a workers' plan here. The Lucas Plan of the 1970s was something we can all start to think about how we can transform and transition our industries in a better world. The speed is important. We remember COVID. Industries tooled up very quickly, retooled their manufacturing industries to create socially necessary things. The Second World War, we transformed our economy to a horrible war economy. We can do the opposite very quickly indeed. And therefore, but when we talk about a plan, a workers' plan, we want all workers. The last speaker put it absolutely right. We all have an interest here, not just one section of the working class. And we shouldn't put one section of the class over the needs of the other. I remember my General Secretary in 2019 stood on this platform and called upon Congress to support those students striking for climate change, against climate change. This conference supported unanimously. I think we need to go back to that kind of unity again, save jobs and the climate.
Thank you, Sean. I will call the NEU, and then I will ask Unite for the right to reply.
Good afternoon, Congress. I'm Jenny Cooper, proud to be speaking as a member of the National Education Union opposing Composite Motion C5. The root of our opposition to this motion, like the previous speakers, is its implicit attempt to blame the climate movement for the mess that successive neoliberal governments have caused. Jobs and futures are what we do, and that is precisely why, for decades, we have called for a just transition with labour rights and social dialogue at its heart, wording which the TUC finally got adopted at the latest round of UN climate talks. But it is simply incorrect to say that the decline of fossil fuel drilling will threaten national security. A failure to transition away from fossil fuels will threaten not only national security, but the security of the entire globe. Teachers have already lost jobs in Zimbabwe because of their schools being swept away in cyclones. Teachers in Bangladesh have lost their jobs because their villages have had to relocate as the sea has moved in. The Bakers Union with others are calling for protection on heat, and the FBU are increasingly called out to previously avoidable wildfires now reaching urban areas. This is why we endlessly repeat, no jobs on a dead planet. Our pupils ask us what's happening. Do we disappoint them by telling them the truth or knowingly teach a lie? We are preparing our pupils for a future we cannot see. Joel from TUC Africa said yesterday, we who have done the least to cause climate change are suffering the most. And this applies to our children and our working class communities here as much as it does to our brothers and sisters in the global south who are right now drowning, burning and facing food insecurity. It also applies to our comrades in the climate justice movement who are scandalously locked up in prisons in the UK for the crime of holding Zoom meetings. This crisis is not only about certain sectors. We all stand to lose, and we're all part of communities that will lose from runaway climate change. The Miners' Union in Colombia knows this and is working with their government to roll out transition plans that include social protection, investment in communities, and compensation. The call should not be no ban without a plan, but a plan before we all go down the pan. Any other option results in the TUC here today calling for a collective suicide pact and holds all of us to ransom. The motion says decarbonisation should be led by the workers and communities involved. Congress, that is all of us. So let's get going. We have motions coming up that kickstart that process. But for all our futures, I urge you please to oppose this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. I invite Unite to exercise their right to reply.
Congress, if only we had an example of what happens if you don't get energy transition right. Well, Congress, I give you the example of New Zealand, where at the moment they are legislating to reverse the 2018 ban on offshore oil and gas exploration, after national gas production dropped 12.5% in 2023 and by 27.8% in the first 3 months of 2024, creating nationwide energy shortages. Now, I'll just say that again, creating nationwide energy shortages. The lakes are low, the sun isn't shining, the wind isn't blowing, and there is inadequate supplies of national gas to meet demand. When you turn on your cooker in the house, gas needs to come from somewhere. When you want to heat your homes, it needs to come from somewhere. It should be homegrown. We shouldn't be exporting the carbon emissions to despotic regimes and questionable regimes throughout the world, because that's what's going to happen, because you're still going to need fossil fuels. What we're asking for is a homegrown transition, because we are much more in line with carbon emissions in this country. We're much stricter than they are in other places throughout the world. There's one refinery in India that is bigger than the 6 UK refineries all put together. In terms of emissions, the UK emissions is nothing compared to the rest of the world. They are reversing in New Zealand the exact policy that we are about to enact. That does not make sense. Do not let oil and gas workers become the miners of our generation. You've heard it here said a number of times, but that is what's coming for the communities up and down this country if we don't support this composite. We are not letting go of one rope until there's another rope there for us. Do not be asking us to give up our jobs for jobs that do not exist in wind, that aren't there. Nobody can tell us where they are. No one can tell us how to apply for them. Nobody can tell kids what qualifications they need for them. And I'll tell you why, because they do not exist. Do not ask us to let go of our jobs until there are other jobs there for us. Stand with workers, support the composite.
Thank you. I will put Composite 5 to the vote. The General Council supports the composite. Can I see those in favour of the composite? Thank you. Can I see those against? I think that's carried. Okay, Congress, we will move to a card vote. If tellers can take their places, will delegates and photographers please be seated and keep the gangways clear? So if I can take the roll call of tellers. Maggie Bremner. Maggie Bremner?
Yeah.
Yep. Philippa Browning. Celia Dignan. Yep. Sally Gates. Thank you. Pam Shan. Yep, thank you. All those in favour of the motion of the composite, please stand, turn to your left and show your card. Keep your card showing until I announce that the vote is taken. Can I remind you to stay standing until I tell you that the vote is over, please? Okay, Congress, the vote in favour has now been taken. You may take your seats. If the tellers return to their places, I'll take the roll call again. Maggie Bremner? Yeah. Philippa Browning? Philippa, yeah. Celia Dignan? Sally Gates? Pamela Shan? Thank you. All those voting against the composite, please stand, turn to your left and show your card. Again, keep your card showing until I announce that the vote has been taken. Okay, Congress, the votes against have now been collated. You may take your seats. Please bear with us while the votes are counted and we'll report it directly to you. results of that card vote. Voting in favour of the composite, 2,712,000. Voting against the composite, 2,457,000. The composite is therefore carried. Okay. Before we move on, could I just make an appeal to photographers? Can I ask photographers to be careful and considerate and not take pictures of visitors using flash photography? Thank you. I now move on to, I call paragraph 2.5 and move to motion 20, relations with Europe. The General Counsel support the motion. I will call on Steve Turner to give the explanation position on behalf of the General Counsel.
Yeah, thanks very much, President. While a card vote might be a rarity, a Congress without an explanation from the General Counsel certainly isn't. And this is the first of the week. Steve Turner, speaking on behalf of the General Counsel, supporting, of course, motion 20, but with the following explanation. This motion is in line with the TUC approach towards the UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement, where it has used its place in the Domestic Advisory Group to push for the UK to keep up with EU standards on employment rights and reduce barriers to trade and cross-border working between the UK and the EU. This motion refers to a renegotiation of the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement as an overall goal. A review of the TCA is required to take place in 2026. The General Counsel would wish the government to seek to use the agreement to better protect workers' rights and good jobs, and will use our influence with the government, the UK and EU domestic advisory groups, and relations with trade unions in Europe to meet those ambitions. And that's the explanation, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. I call Prospect to move the motion and ask the MU to be ready to second.
President Congress, Mike Clancy, moving motion 20. I'm going to take Congress on a journey to convince you to carry this motion involving American sitcom and John Maynard Keynes. And I'm very confident at the end of this I'll have the same number of friends in the trade union movement as I had at the beginning of the speech. So start with a bit of comedy gold, which I think is relevant. You might remember Fraser, who was a radio psychologist, dealing with a very curmudgeonly caller droning on and in a very boring way. And Fraser pointed out to him about Cornell University's electron microscope and how it could get drilled down to the very essence of the atom. And despite the capacity of that device, it could not locate Fraser's interest in the subject area. Now, I often say that to people in my staffing colleagues when they bring things to me, but that's just a reflection of my impatience. Why do I raise that with you? Well, you don't need the power of an electron microscope to locate the benefits of Brexit, because they were never defined and arguably didn't exist. By contrast, the facts are clear. The Office of Budget Responsibility predicts a 4% lower GDP over the next 15 years. The Office of Budget Responsibility calculates a 15% reduction in export trade volumes. The UK is outside the European Green Industrial Deal. And it's bad for workers if you look at the Collective Bargaining Directive, which has been embraced by the EU since we left, or the impacts on entertainment and touring, some of which you're going to hear more about in a moment, I'm sure. Brexit hasn't been good for business, and it's not been good for working people. Now, no one would hold up the EU as a paradigm of social progress, but it did represent a bulwark against governments of the right, and we've had rather too many of them in this country, when they've tried to diminish employment and safety law. This is why the Tories introduced the Regulatory Reform Bill. Now, I hear the democracy has spoken argument that challenges any of us who believe that Brexit was the greatest act of economic self-harm that we've engaged in. And it was based upon misinformation. And understandably, a number of communities dislocated from the national political and economic discourse bought into it. Now I come to Keynes, who has a quote attributed to him. It's actually apparently by somebody else, but Keynes will do. When the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do? Now, democracy gave us Thatcher, Major, Cameron, May, Johnson, Truss, not for very long, and Sunak. So it's not always a reliable barometer of good judgment. There's no political appetite, and more is the pity in the view of some of us and many prospect members, for a conversation about a return to the EU. However, we will not achieve growth objectives without a plan to improve the trade and cooperation agreement, without delivering dynamic alignment, particularly on employment and social protection. And we need to be honest that the Brexit promises are unlocatable, and we need a new, closer relationship with our closest trading partners. I move Motion 20 as a start of a journey that commits us, the trade union movement, to a confrontation with realism, and to realise that we need that new relationship through the review of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement to bring us ever closer again to Europe. I move Motion 20.
Thanks, Mike. Musicians Union, please. And I understand the RMT wants to speak, if you can be ready to do so.
Thank you. So Brexit was an unmitigated disaster for our members, professional musicians, who rely on touring in Europe to make their living. They're dealing now with visa and work permit rules that differ from territory to territory. There's a 90-day in 180 rule, which means that a lot of our members have to stop work mid-tour and come home, and they cease work, and then they have to go and try and find another job because their work's been essentially terminated. The music industry's language has actually changed completely as a result of Brexit. Now we understand what cabotage rules are in Europe, and we understand that if you're a truck carrying musical instruments into Europe for a tour, you can only make a couple of stops before you have to return to the UK. So this has actually affected truck companies as well as musicians and orchestras and theatre companies. And people have had to change the way that they do business. We also used to talk about carnets being used for musicians touring in Europe as a sort of mythical thing. It was something that was that existed before I started working at the Musicians Union, and now they're back. So our members are paying between £300 and £2,000 for a carnet, which lists all of the equipment, including their instruments, that they have to take on tour as essential tools when they're working. This is really problematic, and it means that if you take a drumstick on tour with you in Europe and you break it when you're there, you have to bring back the two halves of the drumstick to prove that you didn't sell it when you were working in Europe, which is just completely bonkers. A lot of these rules are just completely mad, and they're difficult for big companies to deal with, but they're extremely difficult and in some cases impossible for individual musicians to deal with at a grassroots level. Our members are struggling to take merchandise into Europe now. There's more rules and they're limited by the amount they can take. So where they used to be able to supplement their income by selling T-shirts and CDs, they now can no longer do that. There's even problems with trying to post merchandise. One of our delegates has had problems sending merchandise to Ireland, and it's actually just been returned. So all of these problems are really difficult for individual workers to grapple with. Our members are double taxed in a lot of cases, and we ran a recent survey of musicians who used to work regularly in Europe. They told us 72% of them had their income decline from work in the EU, and 75% of them said that bookings had also decreased as a result of Brexit. So this is about renegotiating an agreement to get a better deal for workers, to get better pay for workers and better conditions for workers, which is obviously a fundamental principle of the union movement. It's not about rejoining the EU, it's about trying to get a better deal that will enable our members to make a living in Europe, touring once again. Conservative ministers promised they'd fix this problem for us. They didn't. Labour are promising it, and we need to see that deal improved. So please support this motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Naomi. Okay, I will ask the RMT, please.
Thank you, President. Alex Gordon, RMT, speaking against Motion 20 from Prospect and the MU and asking Congress to oppose. Congress, this morning, we applauded Labour's plan for rail renationalisation, getting Britain moving. We cheered Louise Haig's Passenger Railway Services Public Ownership Bill, now in its third reading, which creates a unified governance structure for our railways and places train operators under public ownership and control. So, Congress delegates, be careful what you wish for. It is important that you know, and we acknowledge, that these critical steps to bringing our railways back into public ownership would now be unlawful and mired in legal challenges if Britain was now a member of the European Union or required to make laws in ongoing dynamic alignment with EU regulations and directives, which Motion 20 calls on Congress to campaign for. Don't take my word for it. Our comrades from the CGT Rail Workers Federation in France are organising opposition to plans to privatise France's passenger rail services, now being implemented by France's national rail operator, SNCF. SNCF is already tendering regional train services to competitive private bidders and is on track to open 100% of France's passenger rail services to private sector competition by 2040. France's rail freight sector is already fully open to private competition, and in 2023 the European Commission fined SNCF for illegal state aid for supporting its own publicly owned rail freight operator, SNCF Freight. These moves to privatise the rail sector in France mirror the liberalisation of publicly owned railways in all other EU member states and are driven not by those countries' own domestic legislation, but by European Union rail liberalisation directives, the so-called Fourth Railway Package. When Motion 20 calls for ongoing dynamic alignment with EU regulations, it is calling for compliance without parliamentary oversight with EU liberalisation directives. It is calling for democratically elected UK lawmakers to be bound by undemocratic liberalisation directives from the European Commission. The Financial Times recently published an article by Rail Partners, the body representing private companies in the UK railways. These vested interests opposing Labour's rail public ownership plans cite the benefits of EU-driven rail privatisation. My union has stood here before to warn Congress about Trojan horses. The so-called People's Vote campaign, as RMT predicted, became a call for a second vote on Britain's EU membership with disastrous consequences for Labour's 2019 general election campaign. Congress, calling this a reckless experiment, shows the same disrespect for democracy and the real people's vote to leave the European Union. I call on the mover to exercise their right of reply, confirm Prospect is not asking Congress to support a return to membership of the EU or the EU single market. Delegates, RMT calls on Congress to oppose.
Prospect, do you wish to reply?
Thank you, Alex. RMT colleagues, I actually, before now, I've done you the courtesy of trying to understand where your particular union came from on that subject, and I do understand your points about state aid. But if you look at a lot of the French economy, if it isn't actually being supported by state aid, I'd be very surprised indeed. And there are a lot of debates about whether this would actually inhibit public support to a whole range of infrastructure provisions. The reality is that if we had not had the general election, and if Labour had not fortunately won such a resounding majority, we'd be looking at the dismantling of our employment and labour laws under the Tory administration, whose direction was demonstrated by the Regulatory Reform, EU Reform Act. And whilst there may be specific industrial interests which might point in different directions, be in no doubt that what our best interests lie in the renegotiation of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which already commits us to level playing field arrangements in relation to social and employment protection. And what this motion is about is ensuring that everybody in the trade union movement understands the importance of that, and we commit to that as a policy objective. If Prospect had been saying to you that what we really mean is that we should step forth on a programme of returning to the European Union, then that is what our motion would have said. It doesn't say that, and it clearly aligns with the General Council's statement. So whilst there may be specific industrial interests, there is a much greater pan-economy, public and private sector need to ensure we have a close working relationship with the European Union, that we work out trading relationships that remove the friction that's been introduced as a result of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement negotiated by the Tories. and that we build on the initial good music from Labour in that respect. We remove friction in the economy, and we get people able to work in a way that ensures their livelihoods are protected. I pay respect to what the RMT fears are, but they are ill-founded in the broader context of how important it is to have a close relationship with the European Union. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, you've heard the debate, you heard the explanation from Steve Turner about the General Council's support. I put motion 20 to the vote. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thank you. That is carried. I now call motion 21, UK Steel and a Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. The General Council support the motion to be moved by Community, seconded by GMB. Community.
Thank you, President. Congress, Jacqueline Thomas, Community Union, speaking on the motion. We all know the challenges our planet faces. The climate crisis is a global crisis, perhaps one of the greatest tests of solidarity we and our movement will ever face. We need to stand shoulder to shoulder across the industries, across the nations, and indeed across the generations to deliver the reforms and the changes to our economy that will ensure that we are stewards of our environment. I'm proud that the United Kingdom is standing at the forefront of this programme to deliver a greener Britain that will protect our coasts, our countrysides for generations to come. I'm also pleased that the UK Parliament, Labour Party, has the ambition and the vision to see this challenge through. Already they're delivering key changes such as lifting the ban on onshore wind farms and laying the groundwork for GB energy. However, leading the way does not come without its challenges. In the steel industry, we've seen this more than many. One of those core challenges is trying to deliver greener production practices at home while competing with international steel producers who make cheaper steel when it comes to the pound, shillings and pence, but an astronomical cost when it comes to carbon and our jobs, and also, most importantly, the futures for our children. If we don't act urgently to implement a robust carbon border adjustment mechanism, then we can risk the UK steel market being flooded by cheap, high-carbon steel, while our greener steel industry is smothered. Our domestic steel industry should never be punished for planning for delivering our future. Our domestic steel industry should not feel as though it's competing in an unfair fight against high carbon. Our domestic steel industry should not be left without support that it needs to thrive. The high cost of carbon steel will have to be adjusted to reflect the true cost of such practices to our planet, to allow our greener domestic steel production to be complete and prosper. A carbon border adjustment mechanism, or CCAM, provides the way that we can have a level playing field. In short, CBAM protects our jobs, our industries and our planet. That's why Community welcomes the Labour government's pledge in its manifesto to implement CBAM for the United Kingdom. But we can't delay. Years of the last Conservative government dragging their little heels on this issue means we've fallen far behind. The European Union has already announced the plans for CCAM. And if they implement these before the UK is ready to implement its own, we risk the domestic market being flooded with high carbon steel that can no longer make its way to the European market. We are therefore calling upon the TUC to work with the Labour government to design and implement a robust CBAM to support decarbonisation of domestic steel production whilst protecting the competitiveness and sustainability of its industry. And crucially, to work to ensure that CBAM aligns with the timeline of the EU's CBAM. A failure to do so would risk our steel industry being drowned in high-carbon steel,
and a vital strategic industry, which supports thousands of jobs in the entire steel communities, which are going to be devastated for a quick profit, ignoring the unpayable costs for the future generation. I believe there is a road to deliver green steel in the UK that is competitive and will provide good skilled jobs now and also for our communities, the future of our communities, which up and down the length of the country. But do we need the protections in place right now? We need the support now. We need CPAM to create the economic environment and support that will allow us to save the environment and safeguard our industry. So please, for our industries and my steel industry, I move the motion. Please support.
Thank you, Delegate. I call the GMB to second.
Congress, Leston B. GMB, seconding motion 21. Congress, a just transition is a jobs transition. GMB is pro-decarbonisation of our economy. How could we not be? Our members are working people, are those at risk from climate change. But we cannot and we will not let millions of British workers be thrown on the scrap heap. Congress, I'm from North West Durham. I've seen firsthand what happens when steelworks close. Our close-knit community saw 3,000 people thrown out of work when that steelworks closed. Unemployment rate rose to 35%. It led to an economic winter. It took more than a decade to see our employment pick itself back up to national average. But the damage was done, and that damage still lives on. Climate change is a global challenge, but we need to put our British workers at the heart of the transition. We will not let speculators, spivs, fat cats use this as an excuse to deunionise and offshore British industry. Look at steel, an industry that our demand is only growing for, but more and more is being produced and provided from abroad. See thousands of good union jobs cast into that fire. Port Talbot is at the heart of the debate. Congress, thousands of jobs will be lost without a lack of an industrial plan and an unwillingness to show leadership for our people, dedicated, unionised people. I understand why the carbon border adjustment mechanism isn't a topic on everybody's dinner table, but Congress, CPAM is one of the most important issues facing this country. The knowledge of the steel union is vital in getting the right policies from the Labour government to ensure the workers are at the heart of an industrial renewal. But the choice for us is whether steel is produced ethically, onshore, in unionised workplaces with the greenest practices, or somewhere else in the world where we can't guarantee either. In Congress, it's vital we align with CPAM and our European neighbours. To not do so would risk 1,000 more jobs at risk of offshoring. But we've said it before, we'll say it again, there is nothing responsible about offshoring our carbon commitments. There is nothing responsible about offshoring millions of British jobs. Steel workers just don't make steel, they're made of steel. But our members need your help to secure their future. I second it. Thank you.
Thank you. I will also take Unite in this debate. Unite.
Prynhawn Da, Steph Wilkins speaking in support of this motion on behalf of steelworker members of Unite. I'm a first-time delegate and a first-time speaker. President, Congress, we meet this week as the future of thousands of steelworkers hangs in the balance in Port Talbot, Llanwern and now Scunthorpe. These are towns which are synonymous with steel. Without the jobs steel sustains, these communities will die. This is the moment that Labour must prove it is on the side of steelworkers and their communities. I know that the solidarity of everyone in this room goes out to them. Congress, this motion from our sister union in steel recognises an important fact. In the 21st century, steel has become a geopolitical weapon. We saw that with the trade wars and the tariffs of the Trump years. I can't believe I had to say that name. We saw it when the dumping of cheap steel from China directly resulted in the devastating closure of the Redcar steelworks in 2015. That closure began the long steel crisis which continues to face our members to this day. As this motion explains, the introduction of a carbon border adjustment mechanism can help. It can at least ensure that steel imports from the high carbon countries like China do not have an unfair price advantage. This protection can at least prevent steelworkers' jobs from becoming collateral damage in trade wars. Congress, this must be just the start of a new commitment from the government to protect our domestic foundation steel industry. Congress, support steelworkers, support this motion. Diolch.
Thank you. Okay, I will put motion 21 to the vote. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? That is carried. I call motion 22, takeover of Royal Mail. The General Council support the motion. I ask CWU to move and ASLEV to second. I note we are falling behind on the timing of business. CWU.
President, Congress, Martin Walsh on behalf of CWU to move motion 2022. Congress, Royal Mail is facing unprecedented challenges. We have a board which is out of its depth and it's out of control. We're faced with a takeover bid from a foreign private equity firm which would make Royal Mail the only postal administrator in the world owned by an overseas investor. We're also faced with a regulator in Ofcom which is working hand in hand with the employer, which is turning a blind eye to quality of service across the UK. Congress, all of you know and trust your local postie. You know from your own experiences in your communities that the service which Royal Mail provides has been undermined. Royal Mail is part of the social fabric of the UK, delivering to 33 million addresses 6 days a week under the universal service obligation. And let's have it right, Congress. Royal Mail belongs in public hands. It should never be privatised, and CW will never stop calling it to be renationalised. Alongside that, we can't turn away from the debate which who owns the future direction of the company. We have EP Group, we have basically the current board, and we have Ofcom. We have got to have the voice of postal workers and the voice of public in the debate. We've engaged with the company bidding to own Royal Mail, foreign equity company EP, owned by Daniel Kaczynski. He also part owns my football team, West Ham. We can't even deliver a corner. How is he going to deliver the mail? So what are we seeking in this motion? We're seeking legal assurances. There'd be no franchising, no outsourcing of work, no break-up of the company, no two-tier working force, and definitely about no compulsory redundancies. We're also looking for a new governance model which makes unions and workers have more of a say in the strategy going forward. And we demand the commitment to grow the company. We want to see real ambition. We're sick and tired of CEOs just running down the company and running down the service. We don't want the takeover, but we've got no faith in the current board, who launched during our dispute one of the most bitter union busting strategies on the workforce. They targeted the reps and members. They ripped up our national agreements. They destroyed morale and they destroyed the service. Congress, during our last dispute, Royal Mail sacked around 200 reps on trumped-up charges. I ask you to show your appreciation to the solidarity of CW members and reps across the UK that saw hundreds of those workers returning in biggest collective reversal of conduct code decisions in UK trade union history. The attack on Royal Mail is the same as the attack on the NHS, railways, utilities. Backed by the Tories, they've run the country into the ground. We're here to say to the Labour government, to Ofcom, to Royal Mail and the EP group, the whole trade union movement is behind CW members and ready to fight to save our postal service. Thank you, Congress. I move.
Thank you. I call Eslev to second. I'm afraid I will not be able to take any other speakers in this debate.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Congress. Simon Weller, Aslev. Now, as part of this, after nearly 200 years, Royal Mail will be scrapping mail trains. 15 Class 325 trains, we call them EMUs, but trains, they're the red ones, they're electric, are to be withdrawn. So the entire Royal Mail electric fleet is being withdrawn. It finally ends on the 10th of October this year, next month. No longer bringing letters for the rich or letters for the poor, no longer the cheque or the postal order, particularly for the DB cargo drivers are at risk of redundancy. We've contacted the DFT, and we had a nice letter from Louise Haigh. Royal Mail is a private company, not owned by the government. It is a commercial decision to move from electric trains to diesel lorries. It might be a commercial decision. It's not a particularly strategic one, particularly in the context of previous debates. What is at the root of Royal Mail's decision to scrap the electric train fleet? It's the cost of the electric traction current. We have already been seeing diesel freight trains being pulled under electric wires because of the cost of the traction current. The diesels can't keep the times. It is, you wouldn't believe, I know this is going to sound very difficult for a lot of people to believe. The railway is really tightly timed, down to 30 seconds, and even freight trains have really punishing timetables. The diesels cannot keep up with the electrics. So whilst it might not be a commercial decision, it's a commercial decision for Royal Mail, this is actually about a strategic decision for our national infrastructure. Where's the level playing field? Why aren't the government supporting the electrification of railways and making it affordable so we have clean traffic? This is as much a commercial failure as it is a strategic failure. A strategic failure, I have to say, by the Labour government.
Thanks, Simon. Okay, I'm going to move to the vote on motion 22. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? That carries. I now call paragraph 2.4 and I call motion 23, public interest regulation. The General Counsel support the motion to be moved by Prospect, seconded by the GMB. And again, I do not intend to take other speakers in the debate.
Thank you, President. Congress, Neil Hope Collins, Prospect, moving motion 23, public interest regulation. Yesterday we heard from our brothers, sisters, colleagues in FBU about their work at Grenfell and the lessons that we have to learn from that tragedy.
Prospect members working for the Health and Safety Executive have also been involved alongside our colleagues in other unions since day one. We've been part of the on-site team, integral to the members of the investigation team, and members have been working the years since then to build and now to enforce the new regulatory changes that are being introduced as a result. The inquiry report that has now been published is long and detailed and will take all of us involved time to digest. But it is clear, even to the most superficial reading, that when a serious inquiry, chaired by someone with the gravity of the Right Honourable Sir Martin Morbick, when a report inquiry says explicitly the government's deregulatory agenda dominated thinking to such an extent that even matters affecting the safety of life were ignored, delayed, and disregarded, we can all be clear, we all know that our regulatory system is well and truly broken. Of course, we've known that for years. We, along with you, have joined colleagues from Prospect, working for the Health and Safety Executive, campaigning against repeated cuts to funding to the regulators, to the inspectors who keep all of us safe at work. Congress, this motion speaks to regulatory environment, but it does pick out what is rather a niche area. It's the regulation that's often overlooked because it doesn't actually focus on social and labour protections as we're normally used to. It looks at economic factors. These regulators, the Ofgem, Ofwat, the likes of those, were introduced in the 1980s and 1990s in response to privatisation of utilities and services. Their approach focuses on prioritising short-term cost-cutting and shareholder returns. And to be honest, that approach has not changed in the 30 to 40 years since they were brought in. That approach looks at efficiencies at the expense of our members' well-being. It prioritises cost-cutting at the expense of society and the environment. This leads to threats to our members' jobs, their pay, their terms and conditions, and it also fails the very people we're supposed to look after, society. It leads to poor treatment of the most vulnerable people. It threatens even taxpayers' money, putting taxpayers' money at risk for the benefit of shareholder returns. And what it also does is it threatens the sustainable investment that we all need for the net zero, for the very matters that we've been debating here earlier this afternoon. Puts that all at risk purely on the basis of economic factors. We do need a regulatory framework that gives due weight to workforce planning, our members, to the social impact, our communities, and to the environmental impact, our world. And we need that to consider strategic investment that plays to that future and speaks to the things that our members need. That needs greater public transparency. It needs democratic accountability. We need those regulators to come out, to step out from behind those closed doors into the light. We cannot leave this anymore to the technocrats, to the free market economists, and to the corporate lobbyists. Congress, what this motion calls for, and I ask you to support, is what we are used to in the social and labour protections field. This is tripartism. We need government regulators. We need elected officials. We need the businesses that provide good work for our members, and most importantly, we need the voice of us, the trade unions in that room talking. We are the voice of our members and our communities. Congress, I so move.
Thank you. Can I have the GMB to second, please?
President, Congress. Paul Hunt, GMB. On behalf of GMB and my colleagues in the water industry, I urge you to support this motion from Prospect. Regulation is not an academic matter, it affects us all. In my industry, the provision of a healthy, clean water supply that is affordable and which does not pollute the environment is fundamental to health and well-being of the nation. Moreover, it is a fundamental human right that transcends greed and profiteering. Large rises in water bills have put significant additional strain on family finances already reeling from the effects of the energy crisis. Indeed, Ofwat reports that 1 in 5 households are now struggling to pay their water bill. Many thousands of trade union members are proud to work within the water sector, but are utterly dismayed at the state of pollution of the waterways and the prospect of rising bills for households and businesses. These workers have been at the sharp end of financial catastrophes created by water companies and have faced cuts to paying conditions, pensions, jobs after years of underinvestment in skills and infrastructure. Regulation is the answer. National planning, research and development are the answers. Without these, Ofwat cannot hope to deliver the long-term transformation of the sector. This means, as this motion clearly shows, that we require far greater scrutiny over the financial models of ownership in the utility companies. The private equity firms who have taken over large swathes of the sector have not been properly scrutinised for decades. GMB would like to see Ofwat apply fit and proper tests on all owners and prospective owners due to the critical nature of the service they provide. In short, it means calling an end to vulture capitalism. In order to do so and to deliver the investment required to meet Ofwat's aims to reduce pollution, improve resilience and adapt climate change towards net zero, we believe that the water company needs to transform the way they operate. This needs to be done through tough regulation, transparency and accountability to the regulators, as well as to government, customers and trade unions who represent tens of thousands of water workers. Congress, in the name of the nation's health, in pursuit of good jobs and conditions at work, and in order to ensure the end to the wanton destruction and pollution of our environment, I urge you to support this motion. I second.
Thank you very much. I put motion 23 to the vote. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? That carries. Congress, we will now move to section 3 of the General Council report, Building a Stronger, More Diverse Movement, from page 28. Congress, before we move to our equality debates, I call our equality audit for 2024. Delegates, due to an oversight, a paragraph on the audit was not included in the General Council report. Every 4 years, we produce an audit to highlight unions' work on equality and collective bargaining. The audit contains inspiring examples of the training, guidance and support the unions offer on equality issues and examples of wins that members have secured in workplaces nationwide. The audit contains much to celebrate, but also shows where we all need to do more. I would encourage you all to read the report and to attend the drinks reception to launch the report on Tuesday evening. Information can be found in your Congress guides. I now call motion 40, ASDA workers deserve better. The General Council support the motion, to be moved by GMB, seconded by Prospect. GMB. Okay.
President, Congress. Karen Morell, GMB, moving motion 40, ASDA workers deserve better.
Congress, I was an ASDA shop worker in Grantham for many years. I worked for a supermarket where we were proud to serve our community, proud to help customers and families, proud to keep the country fed, clothed and clean. But there's not much to be proud about in ASDA today. That's because GMB members are now working in a company which is disintegrating before our eyes. Congress, ASDA has cut 8 million hours from the shop floor. We're seeing rats in the stores, food left out to rot, fire exits being blocked. Members are working in daily fear of being hurt. It's heartbreaking to see what is happening to the once iconic British retailer. ASDA's new private equity owners have loaded billions of pounds of debt into the business. It's the largest ever debt leverage buyout of a UK company. And ASDA workers are carrying the burden of paying the interest on the huge loan taken out by the new owners. More cuts in hours, constant changes to job roles, staff forced to do more with less, and it's just not working. ASDA's market share is down. The owners are also in complete denial about equal pay. They refuse to accept ASDA's undervalues and underpays its women shop workers. The reality of the failure is stolen wages from women workers. Michelle is one of our courageous, very courageous, ASDA equal pay reps. She works all hours to raise 4 children. She's not asking for the world, just to get paid for the value of the work she does. But ASDA won't do it. So instead of being able to be at home looking after her special needs son, ensuring he's getting a proper meal, Michelle has to work yet more extra shifts. Extra shifts where she's not paid for the value of her work. Extra shifts to make up for ASDA's failure. It can be different. GMB is fighting equal pay battles everywhere, and where we get a settlement, things are better. In Renfrewshire Council, Scotland, women workers were paid back money owed and wages were raised. Now women no longer work every hour in overtime just to survive. Today in Manchester, the UK's largest ever private sector equal pay claim is in court. Our claim for equal value work in ASDA has taken 12 years to get to this point. For the 60,000 women involved, it's a very historic moment. The predominantly female retail workforce in ASDA are paid up to £3.74 per hour less than the predominantly male warehouse workers. These are my family, friends and colleagues. They're fighting for equal pay. Congress, let's show these equal pay warriors that we are with them all the way. To ASDA's owners, we say this: glasses are coming off because I am telling you, we will never stop and never give up until stolen wages are returned to the women and we finally get equal pay for equal value work. Congress, it's great that the New Deal for working people has commitments on equal pay, including a measure that will stop women waiting more than a decade for justice. This matter we know from bitter experience, and not everyone will get their stolen wages back. That's because some women will die while waiting for their equal pay. Just let that sink in a moment. In 2024, women in our country are dying while waiting for equal pay. For us, that's very personal. Our great GMB activist, ASDA rep Cathy Murphy, died while waiting for equal pay claim to be resolved. She'll never get justice that she deserved. Congress, in 1888, Clementine Black moved a motion to TUC Congress calling for the TUC to support equal pay. Over 130 years have passed, yet women working in ASDA and so many other places are still waiting. Congress, this scandal must end. ASDA workers deserve better. They deserve a new deal. They deserve the owners who put the customers and workers first. Oh, yeah, okay. Please support GMB's campaign for a better ASDA, and let's support women everywhere and never-ending fight for equal pay. I move. Thank you.
Call Prospect to second.
President, Congress, Carolyn Spence, Prospect, seconding motion 40. The pandemic experience taught many of us kinship with supermarket workers. We hailed them as essential workers, and at one period, when we were allowed out, we spent more time with them than with our friends, extended family, and our own colleagues. They are often at the sharp end and often the advanced guard of issues that also are at the top of Prospect's campaigning and bargaining agendas, such as workplace automation and gender equality. The standard we walk past is the standard we accept. The standard we accept for supermarket workers is coming for us all. With regards to pay and equality, a few things to note. Retail industry overall is about 50-50, but in supermarkets, predominantly, they are female. That in itself makes low pay in the sector a gender equality issue. Gender pay gap reports show significant gender segregation by pay quartile, with many women in the lowest quartile. The BRC and the MBS Group 2022 report highlighted a lack of diversity, gender and ethnicity at board level. And Prospect research shows such stratification of diversity to be also a risk to workplace cultures, not least regarding sexual harassment and discrimination. So a quick look at the private equity. The role that private equity takeovers can play in further eroding pay and conditions and exacerbating inequality and insecurity is also an issue that the whole trade union movement should be concerned and vocal about. Prospect has its own experiences of the risk that private equity structures can pose to jobs, pay, collective voice, and across a range of sectors. And most trade unions represented here will have their own examples. Private equity firms make a lot of money for themselves, and the FT estimates that just 2,500 people shared so-called carried interest of more than 5 billion in the last year. No wonder a leading expert at Oxford Business School has called it the billionaire factory. And in April, the Bank of England warned about the risks posed to economic stability of the private equity financing. Other leading figures in the European financial industry have been more blunt, saying much of the industry resembles a giant Ponzi scheme. So let's stand with the GMB and ensure the TUC as a whole plays its part in holding this industry account and giving all those who work in its shadow a voice.
Thank you very much. Okay, I move to the vote on motion 40. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thank you, that carries. I now call paragraph 3.1 and I call motion 41, closing the gender pay gap. The General Council support the motion to be moved by CSP and seconded by Royal College of Podiatry.
President, Congress, Julia Prince, Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, proudly moving motion 41. Wow, what a great last motion. Thanks to my GMB sister. The gender pay gap is a comparison between men's and women's average rates of pay. It is not to be confused with equal pay, where men and women are paid the same for performing the same job. The gender pay gap is a separate measure, one of workplace, labour market, or labour market disadvantage. We find gender pay gaps in workplaces, economic sectors, or nations where women are overly concentrated in lower paid jobs. This concentration is not a reflection of personal choices. No, it is an outcome of economic, cultural, societal, and educational constraints. It is still the case that these constraints impact the jobs and careers of women more than men. Take the unaffordability of childcare, for example. This pushes families to do more childcare within the home, and this is most often done by women due to historic inequities in household labour. So mothers are forced out of the labour market or compelled into part-time careers with minimal opportunities for career development. Meanwhile, fathers stay and progress in the workplace. Men's average wages rise, the gender pay gap widens. Looking across the country, we do see some signs of hope. The gender pay gap has been slowly decreasing over the last decade. According to the Office of National Statistics, as of 2023, the gender pay gap was below 8%. But in UK healthcare, the gender pay gap persists. Men in healthcare professions grouped together were paid over 10% more than women in 2023. So in effect, women in the NHS worked the whole of January for free. Our new government has a stated ambition of permanently closing the national gender pay gap, but clearly a proactive plan is needed. Indeed, the elimination of public sector pay gaps requires a cross-departmental, all-government mission. This mission must consider unpaid caring responsibilities. We need to redress this gender imbalance in the home, starting with the government's planned review of statutory parental leave. Only 5% of eligible fathers or partners currently take up their entitlement to shared parental leave. This policy failure must be replaced with an offer which is fit for purpose for all families. Leave should be made available and financially possible for all parents, regardless of gender, employment status, or length of service. Next, this mission must consider part-time working. Rates of pay for part-time work tend to be lower than for full-time work. With a high percentage of women working part-time, government must challenge the status quo of senior leadership roles in public services being full-time roles, and facilitate career progression for individuals with caring responsibilities. I myself have been unable to progress for the past 20 years because I work part-time. This mission must also consider occupational segregation and the undervaluing of women's work. Work traditionally done by women is routinely undervalued by employers. Caring, cleaning, and clerical roles, for example, are deemed unskilled. Close the Gap estimate that simply being employed in a female-dominated occupation can reduce your pay by as much as 9%. Finally, this mission must hold organisations to account. Gender pay gap reporting provides a framework within which gaps can be surfaced, enabling us to constructively consider why they exist and what we can do about them. But these reports are too often published late and hidden away without fanfare. Government must compel public bodies to produce these in a timely manner, including the new requirement for organisations to report on how they are eliminating barriers placed on women in the workplace. This mission is vital. We cannot wait the 2 decades it is estimated it would take for the national gender pay gap to fully close on its current trajectory. No, women need pay justice now, and so do our public services. Congress support this motion.
Thank you. I call the Royal College of Podiatry. I will, in the debate, call NAS, UWT and PCS, but I won't be able to take more speakers than that. Royal College.
Congress. Sally Gates, Royal College of Podiatry and first-time speaker, seconding this motion. I'm proud to be a podiatrist. It might not be a glamorous job, but I love it. It's a calling, a vocation. That said, I also love creature comforts such as a roof over my head, food on my table, and enough fuel to warm my home. During the early days of the recent strike action from colleagues working in the NHS, top Tory ministers, including Rishi Sunak, described nursing as a vocation. The implication being that if your work is sufficiently fulfilling, you don't need to be compensated financially. Unfortunately, love of the job alone is not enough to keep you warm and the hunger pangs at bay. Nurses and allied health professionals are more likely to be women. As a female podiatrist, I'm one of about 75% of my profession. For nurses, women make up 89% of the workforce. The healthcare professions where we see the ratio shift are doctors, dentists, and high-level managers, where the gender split is roughly equal, leaning slightly towards more men. In 2004, a universal pay scale called Agenda for Change was introduced to ensure fair pay across NHS jobs. The only professions outside of this pay scale are doctors, dentists, and some high-level managers. While this pay scale should reduce the gender pay gap by ensuring equal pay for equal work, it ultimately separates the roles most likely to be filled by men to ensure that overall the gender pay gap continues. Closing the gender pay gap is not simply a case of ensuring that this woman is paid the same as this man if they do the same job, but looking at entire professions to ensure that female-dominated roles are not left substantially behind those dominated by men. Pay negotiations have been more fruitful since the change of government, for which we're grateful. Those on Agenda for Change have been awarded a pay increase of 5.5% for the coming year, which is nearly double the rate of inflation over the past year. In July, doctors were offered a deal that averaged 22%, widening the gap between the male and female-dominated healthcare professions. I have never met an NHS worker who didn't deserve to be paid more for the work that they do, be they male, female, doctor, nurse, porter, or cleaner. Every worker is valuable and deserves a fair wage that does not depend on the gender makeup of their profession. We're proud to second this motion.
Thank you. Call NASUWT.
President, Congress, and it's only because of the ministrations of a very talented podiatrist that I was able to get up those steps, I can tell you that. Okay, Cathy Duggan speaking, the NASUWT in favour of motion 41, closing the gender pay gap. NASUWT welcomes this GMB motion on closing the gender pay gap. The gender pay gap in teaching remains a source of shame, a reflection of governments and employers failing to improve conditions for women teachers. The feminisation of the education sector has resulted in inequality. What is astounding to me in this dog day afternoon speech that I'm making now is that I could have lifted this from, 15 years ago. Why is there still a gender pay gap? If anyone can answer that, answers on a postcard. Despite years of campaigning, women workers in education continue to face discriminatory practices leading to financial penalties in their salaries and in their pensions. The Department of Education 2023 Schools Welfare Census showed that a gender pay gap exists at nearly every stage of a female teacher's career, with the most pronounced gaps in leadership. Male secondary heads earn 4% more than their female counterparts, while male school leaders in the early years and primary sector, a female-dominated sector, earn 3% more. NASUWT commissioned analysis from the University of Warwick and shows a clear pattern that women teachers in their 20s just about keep pace, in their 30s and 40s they don't, and they're falling to more than 10% of their male colleagues. I'll give you you don't need to be a rocket scientist to work out why that is, do you? Because they've gone and had kids. Performance-related pay worsened the situation. By 2018, only 40% of women progressed to the upper pay scale. Female part-time teachers fared even worse. We are pleased that the government has agreed to remove performance-related pay, and we now call upon this Labour government to implement a single scale for all classroom teachers. Furthermore, the gender reporting process must be reviewed. Most of the gender reporting figures that I see from local government are nonsense. Just nonsense. I don't know who writes them. Perhaps they're asking their year one pupils to write something. I don't know. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. Call PCS.
President, Congress, Emma Scott, PCS delegate, speaking in support of motion 41. PCS are pleased to support this motion as the closing of the gender pay gap needs to be addressed now, not in 4, 5, 6 or 10 years' time. Like the NHS, the UK civil service has a majority female workforce. In the civil service, we have a significant gender pay gap, which stands at 9.1%. The median gender pay gap in the civil service is still greater than the overall gender pay gap for full-time employees across the entire economy. So the government needs to get its own house in order. TUC analysis published earlier this year showed that women essentially work for the first 52 days of the year for free due to the gender pay gap. This Congress is not acceptable. Research commissioned by PCS reveals that men in the civil service earn approximately £3,000 more annually than their female counterparts, equating to £250 monthly premium. This disparity is largely due to men occupying higher grades within the senior civil service, showing that the Westminster Boys' Club extends beyond Parliament. We endorse the policies detailed in this motion, which would bring the Labour election manifesto to life. The manifesto states, Labour will take action to reduce the gender pay gap, building on the legacy of Barbara Castle's Equal Pay Act. Sorry, I can't speak. If you are committed, we are prepared to collaborate to close the gender pay gap. One significant barrier to achieving equal pay in the civil service is delegated pay bargaining, which prevents these disparities from being resolved through national sectorial collective bargaining. Our union has a long-standing history of advocating for and winning equal pay claims in the civil service, including within the prison service and the MOD. Next year marks the 50th anniversary of the Equal Pay Act, which was passed in 1970. Progress has been far too slow. Congress, please support this motion. Let's ensure the gender pay gap really does close for good under this government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now move to the vote on motion 41. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thank you. That carries. Delegates, we will now see a short film to highlight the achievement of training over 500 black reps and activists this year, as mentioned in Paul's address this morning.
I'm Izzy Onyekbanjo, and I'm a rep for GMB.
My name is Adam Alarakia. I am part of Communication Workers Union.
My name is Peter de Graft Johnson. My union is PCS. What made me get involved in trade unions is the knowledge that together we are stronger than if we are divided. And so whatever workplace that you're in, if you can come together with other workers, then you can fight for your rights more effectively.
I'm a member of a staffing association, and it was our annual general meeting, and the lady who came, she was amazing. She blew us all away. So afterwards I made a point of going to speak to her. She encouraged me to join their union, which I promptly did. And she said, you should come on board and be a rep, do something further. So I thought about it for a bit, thought about it a bit more, and then I decided to go and do it. And it's the best decision that I have ever made.
From a young age, I'm getting on a bit now, so I'm 43 plus VAT. So when I was younger, I always wanted to become a teacher. And when I got involved with the union movement in my 20s, I went along through the journey of going through these courses, and then I wanted to become a union tutor. So it was always a passion, and it still is. And the reason why I wanted to become a representative is because I want to give back to the union movement and the wider community what I received.
Being a rep is not easy. It's not without its challenges. And I work in an organisation that's quite patriarchal. It's hierarchical. And I think as a black female, I often felt like I was at the bottom of the barrel. And I thought, if I can influence in any way issues that affect people on a daily basis because of the jobs that they do, the grades that they're on, this is a vehicle. Being a rep is a vehicle that I can use to help them overcome those difficulties. And I look at myself, the journey that I've had since I've become a trade union rep. I would never have thought I'd be sitting here sharing my story with other people and the changes that I can make to improve people's lives.
I wanted to be involved in the TUC's Black Activist Programme because I wanted to meet like-minded people in the union who also would come from similar backgrounds to me, that wanted to make the union better, specifically for people who are marginalised based on skin colour, race, ethnicity. Historically, this country has had internalised racism that has played out in the workplace, and I know that the TUC want to fight back against that and to make workplaces truly equitable places, regardless of what your skin colour or your race or your ethnicity is. And I thought, let's be a part of that positive change.
In the union movement, there is so many members who are diverse from different backgrounds. And if we do have representatives who are, from all backgrounds, people can see and say, hang on, this is for me and I should be part of the union.
It's important to be a black trade unionist in Britain because of the history of racism within the trade union movement in Britain. I'm of the opinion that you have to change systems from the inside and the outside. Things happen quicker when you have effective advocates fighting for change from within the system as well. And the union is just made up of its people. And if the union does not reflect the people, then it's not an effective union, in my opinion.
It's important to have reps, full stop, and it's important to have reps from all different walks of life. But it's important to have black reps because they can speak to members, whether it's in a different language, they understand the cultural values, they understand maybe religious concerns. There's a whole host of protected characteristics that a rep of colour can home into. That's why I think it's vital that there are more black reps.
To anyone who is interested in doing any of the trade union courses or becoming a representative for the union, I was born in Africa. When I came to UK, I could not speak English at all. And now I am where I am at the moment. So I believe that anyone who wants to do something, do not think anything is impossible. It doesn't matter how big the task is. There's a lot of support available for you. You are going to make a massive difference in people's life by becoming a representative.
It's best to get involved, change the things that you feel need to be changed, and also learn the things that can be learned.
Whatever you learn, it's more power to your elbow. It's something that you didn't know yesterday, but you know now. So if opportunity presents itself to go on a course, TUC course, do it.
Delegates, I now call paragraph 3.2, 5.13, and I call Patrick Roach, who chaired our anti-racism task force. Patrick.
Thanks, President. Congress, what a fantastic video and testimony to the amazing work that we're all doing, that you are all doing. 4 years ago, when black workers were left dying at work, when they were left unprotected by a shameful government of lawbreakers, we stepped up. And when the government of multimillionaires, bankrolled by the likes of Frank Hester, who got off on inciting racism, misogyny and violence towards black women, shame on them, we demanded change. We called them out and we fought back. And now we're showing that our movement is on the side of black workers and on the side of all working people. 2 years ago, it was a proud moment to see the Anti-Racism Manifesto and Action Plan secure the unanimous support of Congress, committing our movement to a 5-year programme of action on anti-racism. We said that this should not be a paper exercise, not lip service, not a pretense. Instead, we demanded concrete action. But colleagues, how far have we come? Have we delivered the progress that we promised? Are we confident of building a movement that is bigger and stronger, more diverse, more representative than it was before we kicked the Tories out? Because that is what we have to do. Just 2 years ago, this Congress asked every affiliate to sign up to our anti-racism action plan and manifesto. You demanded action from every union. We've seen some amazing examples of work taking place in our unions. Across the country, our Black Activist Programme, networks and campaign actions are growing in strength. Last year, at Congress, we launched the Anti-Racism Tracker to support unions to develop their plans, review their progress, boost our impact. And we published independent evaluations into the work of the task force, an evaluation that recognised that strides had been made, but that challenged us to do even more. And this year, we're moving to the next phase, to map our actions, measure our progress, and hold our movement to account over the next period, providing high-level visibility, measuring progress annually, increasing black membership density in our unions, reviewing the ethnicity of our staff and membership profiles, measuring our race pay gap. Because a strong union, a strong movement, is one that represents us all. Now, we've already set a target to train 500 black activists annually. But that can only be a start, Congress. Those reps must also have a voice, and they must be listened to. We must ensure they have the facilities and opportunities to take the lead in our unions and no longer face a reality where doors that should be open are being closed to them. Colleagues, we still have work to do to make our anti-racism commitments a reality for all of our black members. So following Congress, we're going to be taking forward our new anti-racism data dashboard to show the reality of where we are making progress. Through the work of our Implementation Oversight Group, we'll be building on the evidence that you give us in the equality audit to track our movement's progress. We're going to be setting targets for where we want to be, and we want your unions to do exactly the same. And let me finish by saying this. Our anti-racist work is as important today as it was when we started the work of the task force. You know, from black workers being left exposed to die at work during the COVID pandemic, to our communities being attacked by racist thugs, spreading racist hate on our streets and online to divide working class communities, the product of 14 years of Tory divide and rule. What we saw at the general election, the misogyny, transphobia, Islamophobia, racism, the 4 million votes for reform. You know, Nigel Farage says that he's coming for Labour. Well, we know what that means. It means that he and others are coming for our members too. Well, he may have our members in his sights, but I'll tell you this, he hasn't reckoned on us, Congress. Actions speak louder than words. Congress, we will defeat the racists, and we'll defeat them by standing together united. To defeat the racists, to defeat the fascists, including by joining with Stand Up to Racism's counter-demonstration on the 26th of October, by taking action in our workplaces, by equipping all of our reps, all of our activists, with the tools to build a strong and cohesive union movement and workplaces with our agenda at its heart. By putting our anti-racism manifesto at the top of our union agendas. By organising, by campaigning and bargaining. By winning more workers to join us and join in. Because when we organise, together we rise.
Thanks for that, Patrick. I now call motion 42, the TUC Black Workers Conference. The General Council supports the motion to be moved by unison on behalf of the TUC Black Workers Conference and seconded by the GMB.
President, Congress, James Minto from Unison and also on the TUC Race Relations Committee. Very proud to move this motion on behalf of the TUC Black Workers Conference. Congress, today we gather to address a pressing issue that persists in our society, the ethnicity pay gap. Despite strides towards equality, disparities in pay based on ethnicity continue to undermine the principles of fairness and justice. It's imperative that we confront this issue head-on and strive for meaningful change. Unison's campaign to address the ethnicity pay gap recognises that closing the gap is fundamental to achieving equality for black workers. And our campaign has been taking shape since September 2022. The ethnicity pay gap is not merely a statistic. It represents systemic injustice and inequality. It reflects deep-rooted biases and structural barriers that prevent individuals from marginalised ethnic backgrounds from receiving fair compensation for the work they do. This gap not only robs individuals of their rightful earnings, but also perpetuates cycles of poverty and inequality within communities. We must acknowledge that the ethnicity pay gap is not a result of differences in qualifications or capabilities, but rather stems from discriminatory practices and biases present in our workplaces. Studies have consistently shown that individuals from black communities are paid less than their white counterparts, even when factors such as education, experience, and occupation are taken into account. To address this issue, we must take proactive steps to dismantle the barriers that perpetuate the ethnicity pay gap. This requires a multifaceted approach involving employers, policymakers, and society as a whole. Employers must commit to pay transparency, equitable hiring and promotion practices, and diversity training to mitigate conscious, unconscious, or implicit bias. Policymakers are a crucial role to play in enacting legislation that promotes pay equity and holds organisations accountable for discriminatory practices. Additionally, investments in education and skill development programmes targeted at marginalised communities can help close the skills gap and increase economic opportunities for all. Congress, the incorporation of an ethnicity pay gap reporting as a standard practice in corporate disclosures needs to be at the heart of our work and requires a wider shift in society. And we need that shift to happen now. That's why we are calling on Congress to help campaign and call for legislation to make ethnicity pay gap reporting mandatory, and for this to become a standard practice in employers' policies and procedures, and also to help us promote initiatives that support employers to conduct transparent pay audits, identify disparities, and help make and take corrective action with trade unions involved. Congress, it was welcomed that the Women and Equality Committee published a report in February 2022 stating that ethnicity pay gap reporting should be mandatory. But the previous government's response was pathetic. The new government has made a commitment to make this a reality, and as highlighted, it was in the King's Speech. But we must continue to keep the pressure up in support of this vital campaign, which is crucial to tackling inequality in the labour market. Congress, the ethnicity pay gap is a symptom of a larger systemic inequalities, and these demand collective action from unions. Let us all stand together in the fight for equality and justice, ensuring that every individual ensures the respect, dignity, and reward they deserve, regardless of their ethnicity. Thank you, Congress. I move.
Thank you, GMB.
Good afternoon, President, Congress, Fazana Jumma from GMB, seconding motion 42 on behalf of the TUC Black Workers Conference. The unions have been key players in improving the lives and life chances of black, brown and migrant workers in challenging racism and racial inequality. From the gates of Grunwick to the doors of the South African Embassy during the apartheid era, we have won and earned our battle scars for workers. Some forms of racism are plain to see. Just look at the wave of civil disorder and outpourings of hatred that enraged our cities this summer. Others are hidden away, cloaked in microaggressions, in words and small print, in workplace policy and procedures. As trade unionists, we exist to make work better for all. It should therefore be a fundamental right that what you earn should not be based on your race or ethnicity. Women workers face double penalties of discrimination, earning on average 28% less than white male co-workers. Congress, this is unacceptable and continues to increase the pay gap. For this, I would urge you to support this motion and the general duty of employers, regardless of size of their workplace, to report upon ethnicity pay gaps and disparities. This motion is a first step to exposing what we know is happening so we can address and combat the problems effectively and conscientiously that pulls our workers into poverty and working many hours more than their colleagues doing work of equal value. The battle against discrimination in our society and in our workplaces is not one that has a grand conclusion. It is one that has to be fought afresh each and every day, often through hard work and the gathering of reporting data. This is how we tackle systemic racism in our workplaces. Employers and our government policymakers are key to getting this right for our workers and removing the hierarchy of racism. An injury to one is an injury to all. Let us begin by repairing the hurt that stems from low pay and poverty, grounded in discrimination and bias, and by ensuring that human rights and equality are not abstract, but the reality and principled expectations of all workers, regardless of race, colour or creed. Congress, I urge you to support this vital, well thought out and practical motion that brings us closer to our central goals as trade unionists. Thank you.
Thank you. I will take the NASUWT
afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, Conference. Nisa Khan, NASUWT, the Teachers' Union, speaking in support of the motion. We need to encourage employers to conduct transparent pay audits, identify disparities and implement diversity and inclusion programmes that foster career advancement for black workers. This is essential if we are to eliminate biased employment practices. We need to advocate for legislation, but equally we can't wait for the legislation to catch up. We need to promote initiatives to support employers in conducting transparent pay audits, identify disparities, and take corrective measures with the help of union involvement. Imagine if we waited for legislation to solve all our problems. We'd still be waiting for the wheel to be invented. At the NSUWT, we have been making significant strides in promoting equality and addressing pay disparities in the workplace, and we began within the union itself. As part of our calls for a new deal for teachers, we have campaigned for a national workforce plan to promote equality, diversity and inclusion. We've pushed for a requirement for school and college employers to publish details of their gender, ethnicity and disability pay gaps. Our campaigns have focused on promoting flexible working hours to support a work-life balance. We've advocated for better pay and better conditions. In addition, our Valued Worker Scheme, run jointly with GMB, where are you, GMB? Unison, where are you? And Unite. These are the best unions, I say. So together we've ensured that the Valued Worker Scheme recognises employers that commit themselves to this agenda. Congress, we are actually winning. These successes are a testament to what can be achieved when we work together towards a common goal. Closing the ethnicity pay gap is not just a campaign, it's a movement towards justice and equality. I'm not a confident public speaker, so please do come and speak to me about equality, ideas and notions. Please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you to all those speakers. I now put motion 42 to the vote. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thank you. That carries. I now call motion 44, suicide prevention and awareness. The General Council support the motion to be moved by NASUWT and seconded by Equity. I don't intend to take other speakers in the debate.
Okay. Congress President, Rashida Din, National President of the NASUWT, the Teachers' Union, moving motion 44. What a privilege to move this incredibly important motion, suicide prevention and awareness. Congress, we are in a mental health emergency. Emergency, I do not use that word lightly. The Cambridge Dictionary defines emergency as something dangerous or serious that happens suddenly, which in this case it really hasn't, but needs fast action in order to avoid harmful results. There can be no doubt the rising numbers of suicides and attempts, particularly by people within the working age population, constitutes an emergency, particularly amongst healthcare workers, education and other public sector workers. The recent NASUWT Wellbeing at Work survey of nearly 12,000 responses found that 84% of teachers have experienced more work-related stress in the last 12 months, 86% believe their job impacted their mental health, and 68% their physical. 3% say that they have self-harmed as a result of their work. 1 in 5 have taken medication. 13 have sought counselling. These are shocking statistics. The Health and Safety Executive data shows that among women, primary and nursery teachers had the 5th biggest mortality rate from suicide. Without doubt, this is a mental health emergency. Ofsted has quite rightly faced scrutiny since the suicide of head teacher Ruth Perry. At her inquest, a coroner ruled that Ofsted inspection contributed and warned of further risks unless action was taken. What a relief the one-word judgments have now gone from inspections. About time, victory from the NASUWT and our other sister education unions. We passed the motion unanimously on the emergence we face and the rise of suicides and suicidal thoughts at our national conference this year. And we heard some incredibly powerful testimony from our members. Pressures of the jobs are increasing. The number of teachers experience poor mental health in our school, one teacher said. We are being failed and we need to work together to protect ourselves. Too many teachers are having their health destroyed, and while other teachers leave the profession to save their sanity. That was from our GS, Patrick Roach. All of this is in a backdrop of a teacher recruitment and retention crisis. This picture will be, in no doubt, mirrored across many sectors. If we are to turn the tide of this mental health emergency, Congress calls the TUC to initially first campaign for fully funded, there's that magic word again today, you know, that laser-focused Labour government, mandatory mental first aid training that includes suicide prevention, that suicide awareness and prevention are bargaining priorities across all of our workplaces, across the TUC movement, and to lobby for increased funding for mental health services in those workplaces. We need to act fast to avoid harmful results. Congress, we must make it so. Please support this motion. I move.
Thank you very much. I call Equity to second.
Eleanor Sutton, Equity, first-time delegate, first-time speaker. President and Congress, Equity is so pleased to second this motion from our friends at NASUWT, advocating for better support to address rising numbers of suicides. At Equity, we know that working conditions in the performing arts too often put our members' mental health at risk. A 2020 survey of 5,000 performers in film and TV found that 87% had experienced a mental health problem, a figure no doubt exacerbated by the impact of the pandemic on our industry. A heady combination of the precarity of freelance work, income insecurity, antisocial working hours, and time away from home puts immense strain on performers' mental health. Income in the performing arts is low and unpredictable. On average, Equity members earn just £15,000 a year from their work in the industry, leading them to juggle typically insecure jobs alongside performance work on short contracts often lasting just days. Add to this that in a highly competitive industry, performers are under immense pressure to submit to punishing working conditions across long and unsociable hours. Let's speak plainly, Congress. Suicide is a killer that we are not doing enough to prevent. Over 6,000 people died by suicide in the UK in 2023 alone. After 14 years of systematic dismantling of the NHS, it is imperative that the new government commits to a well-funded, robust mental health infrastructure. Employers too must take more seriously their responsibility to create safe workplaces for mental health. That means addressing understaffing, overwork, insecurity, and gruelling hours. Congress, we know that a unionised workplace is a safer workplace. From the outset, the union movement has fought for workers' rights to a safe, healthy place of work. Mental illness is a health and safety issue, and it must be taken as seriously as workers' physical safety. As trade unionists, we must use our power to ensure that employers and the government can no longer ignore this crisis across all of our industries. We must demand much better than workplaces which push our comrades to take their own lives. Please support this motion. Congress, I second. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I move to the vote on motion 44. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thank you. That carries. I now call motion 45, inclusivity in maternity services. The General Council support the motion, to be moved by the RCM and seconded by the Society of Radiographers. RCM.
President and Congress. Emma Sarson for the Royal College of Midwives. First time at Congress, first time speaking. Moving motion 45, inclusivity in maternity services. The Royal College of Midwives have been campaigning to ensure that midwifery education is an environment where neurodiverse students can thrive as they train to become midwives. Neurodivergent describes a brain that functions in ways that diverge from the dominant standards of normal. There isn't a right or wrong. Diversity is something to be valued. Studies suggest that there are growing numbers of neurodivergent healthcare professionals. The Royal College of Midwives wants to encourage people from a range of backgrounds and neurominorities into the profession. This is vital as midwives help mothers and families from a diverse range of backgrounds and neurotypes. The perspectives offered by a diverse healthcare workforce can enhance care for women, birthing people and their families and improve outcomes for some communities. Although we have seen an increase in understanding about neurodivergence, there is still much to do to ensure that neurodivergent midwifery students and NHS staff can thrive at work. Workplace inclusivity begins with recruitment and selection processes that meet the needs of neurodivergent people. This means fair and open recruitment processes, diverse interview panels, clear instructions, clear interview questions, alongside reasonable adjustments where required. Health passports document any reasonable adjustment that may be needed and allow staff to share their needs. Workplaces that are inclusive of neurodivergent midwives or maternity support workers tend to provide a variety of communication styles to meet the needs of all staff. They may have a quiet or sensory space. They make flexible working the norm. Creating these types of workplaces will benefit all staff, meaning that the workplace is more accessible for all. Traditional educational curricula and workplace developmental training commonly lack sufficient adjustments for neurodivergent students and staff, inadvertently leading to their exclusion from full participation. It is crucial that higher education institutes and NHS workplace areas create inclusive and accessible environments to support neurodivergent staff and students by evolving a culture of acceptance. The neurodiversity movement and what acceptance means for neurodivergent individuals is complex. Creating working environments that remove the barriers that some neurodivergent staff face, alongside increasing staff understanding and awareness, is a really important start. Achieving a change in culture with regard to how neurodivergent staff are perceived by colleagues in the workplace is paramount to reducing inequalities. Eliminating ability bias and discriminatory assumptions will remove the very real barriers for some neurodivergent staff in relation to equal access to professional development and training opportunities. Educating the workforce is absolutely key. This includes making sure NHS staff at all levels understand neurodiversity, with a particular focus on dispelling common stereotypical ideas and myths. Introducing neurodiversity awareness training as a mandatory component of their equality, diversity and inclusion training will facilitate this. Building an inclusive maternity workforce is critical to ensuring midwives and maternity support workers and the women and people that they care for feel safe and listened to. Congress, I ask you to support this motion.
Thank you. Can I have the seconder, Society of Radiographers, please?
Thank you very much, President, and good afternoon, Congress. I'm Richard Evans from the Society of Radiographers, and really glad to have the opportunity to second Motion 45, and grateful to colleagues at the Royal College of Midwives for highlighting the need for neurodiversity awareness in maternity services and everywhere. The words that stood out for me when I first looked at the motion, and these words that are referring to service users, people that use the services provided by midwives, they deserve to be cared for by people who understand the challenges they face. Isn't that what we all want? Isn't that what we all want for ourselves and our families, to be looked after by professionals that understand the challenges that we're facing in a healthcare environment or in any environment, particularly in our union movement, I think. 1 person in every 10 experiences life through a lens of some form of neurodiversity. It's vital that everyone providing healthcare understands this and are trained to recognize, respect, and value the specific needs that those service users experience. And what better way to enable this than through welcoming neurodivergent people into the healthcare workforce? But the motion before us describes fear. People with neurodiversity are put off training to become healthcare professionals because they are afraid that the training programs will not be equipped to accommodate their specific learning needs. As we've heard, the workforce crisis facing the NHS is critical. Services are suffering through too few qualified staff. How can it be that anyone who is qualified and has a passion to serve in the NHS needs to be fearful that they will not be welcome to train? How can service users with neurodiversity be looked after by professionals that understand their challenges unless people experiencing those same challenges are encouraged and welcome to train without fear? Like our midwife comrades, the Society of Radiographers is proud to lead in promoting neurodiverse practices, guidance and training to support service users and also our members. But we're also, like our colleagues elsewhere in healthcare, aware that there is much work to do. Please support this motion. I second.
Thank you very much. I now put motion 45 to the vote. Will those in favour please show? Thank you. Will those against please show? That is carried. I now call motion 46, mental illness in prisons. The General Counsel support the motion to be moved by POA and seconded by NAPO. Steve.
Thank you very much, President. Congress, Steve Gillen, General Secretary, POA. I know it's getting late in the day and people are probably anxious to go, but this is an extremely important motion on this order paper, because I think the way we're treating our mentally ill prisoners in this country is an absolute disgrace. It's a stain on British society, it's a stain on governments, it's a stain on everybody really, and it's something that needs to be addressed. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that there's a big pot of money available to this incoming Labour government. You only had to listen to motions earlier about everybody saying what their industry is like. There is a prison crisis, overcrowding. The reality is for us, in order to deal with overcrowding, you need to divert the mentally ill away from prisons. Prisons are no place for those individuals. And the courts, unfortunately, are using it as the default position because there's nowhere else to send them. So it keeps them safe from themselves. What we need to, a recent estimate is there's 8,000 prisoners that have got mental health issues that previously they may have been given a community award to go and get a mental health treatment requirement, which would have kept them out of prison. But that's not happening anymore. And it's putting a pressure on prison officers who do not get the training for mental health issues. That's the job of nurses and the NHS and the trained professionals to deal with mental health issues. And I just think to put someone incarcerated, and it's gone on for far too long now. I remember when I was a serving prison officer at Bulwood Hall, which was a female prison, it was inhumane, quite frankly, to lock up some of the women there who had mental health issues simply caused by the past when they had been sexually abused or violence done to them, and yet there they were in prison with no rehabilitation, no mental health services, just scratching the surface. That cannot be right. It has been said time and time again that we judge society as to how we treat our prisoners in our care. Now, at the end of the day, there's lots of people that deserve to be in prison, but I actually think we need a total rethink. We need a royal commission into not just prisons, but the whole criminal justice system, because it is broken. And it's going to take Labour a long, long time to fix the brokenness of our system, because the Tories totally destroyed it through a lack of cuts. And of course, cuts have consequences. So it will take the Labour government probably a long, long time, but they can start with progress to make sure that we divert people away. Because let's face it, it's actually costing probably about £40,000 per prisoner place. That's money that could be spent in our NHS, in our communities, to make these people better. Because we are not the best people to look after the mentally ill. Because I've been around when I was operational, I never received 1 day of mental health training, ever, quite frankly, as a prison officer, and my colleagues tell me the same. Where has the compassion gone if we're just warehousing people and making them worse instead of better? But to do that to the mentally ill is quite shameful. Please support the motion, Congress.
Thank you, Steve. I call Napo to second.
President, Congress, Ian Lawrence, General Secretary at NAPO Probation and Family Courts. Congress, I'm delighted to second this motion. I don't need to rehearse the excellent points that Steve has made. In a week where yet another report on the appalling state of mental health provision in the UK has appeared, it's clear that this issue is yet another major challenge for the new government. Of course, there is a need to address the issues set out in the motion, especially in relation to staff safety. But there are additional problems that need to be simultaneously addressed by the new Lord Chancellor. Namely, that as Steve has said, there are too many people in our prison system for offences that should be managed in our communities. And that presupposes the facilities are available in our communities to do just that. That sentence lengths, according to a report from the Howard League for Penal Reform, are longer than they were a decade ago and are the highest anywhere in Europe. That the judiciary are all too often forced into deciding that prison, rather than alternative, secure facilities, is the only available option for them. And that is a shameful state of affairs. The choice for this government is clear. We now need a holistic review of penal policy in the UK, and this must include consideration of the value of short-term prison sentences for everybody, not just people suffering from mental health issues, particularly for offences that don't present a clear and present danger to public safety. The last government bucked that challenge, typical of their spinelessness in the face of problems. This government cannot and must not be allowed to do the same. Thank you, Congress.
Thank you very much, Ian. I now put motion 46 to the vote. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thank you. That carries. I now call motion 47, promoting opportunities for young people with neurodiversity challenges. The General Council support the motion, to be moved by Aegis and seconded by AEP. Aegis.
President, Congress, Anya Lomax, Aegis the Union, moving motion 47, first time delegate, first time speaker. Thank you. This motion is not just about policy, it's about people and has been inspired by my colleague Brian McDade, AGS of Aegis. Brian's son, who is 17 years old, autistic, and like so many others entering adulthood with hopes, dreams and aspirations of living a full and independent life. But unfortunately, despite his desires to live as independently as possible, the reality is that the opportunities available to him, and many like him, are limited. That is why we are bringing this motion forward today. Brian's personal experience as a father, watching his son grow up, has highlighted just how many barriers exist for neurodivergent young people. His son is one of the many who need the right support to open doors of opportunity. The first, most crucial step for these young people is gaining employment, but without inclusive practices and supportive environments, these doors often remain closed. The statistics paint a troubling picture. Employment rates among neurodivergent adults, whether autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, or with other neurodevelopmental conditions, are far lower than for the rest of the population. Many employers are simply not equipped to understand, accommodate and nurture the unique strengths of neurodivergent individuals. And so time and time again, we see neurodivergent young people being left behind, their potential untapped, and their voices unheard. We are asking the TUC to actively encourage employers to create tailored opportunities for neurodivergent young people so that we can break down the barriers that prevent them from entering and succeeding in the workplace. The goal is not just employment, it's meaningful, supported and inclusive employment. Here's how we propose to do this. Awareness and training. Employers need to understand neurodivergence. This starts with training, from the boardroom down to the shop floor. We must push for comprehensive training programs that increase awareness and understanding of neurodevelopmental conditions, so neurodivergent employees are seen as exceptions, but as valuable contributing members of the team. Work experience programs. Neurodivergent young people need opportunities to gain practical skills and work experience. Without this, they face a much steeper climb into the adult world. We advocate for the establishment of work experience and internship programs that are designed specifically to meet their needs and help them develop confidence and skills to thrive in the workplace. Mentorship and support. We all know how important it is to have someone to guide us when we're starting out. This is even more critical for neurodivergent individuals. Introducing mentorship schemes will provide these young people with the guidance and support they need, allowing them to learn from experienced colleagues and navigate the challenge of the workplace. Inclusive recruitment practices. Finally, recruitment itself needs to change. Neurodivergent individuals often struggle to get through traditional recruitment processes, which are not designed with their needs in mind. We need to encourage employers to adapt more inclusive recruitment practices that remove these barriers
and ensure that all candidates are assessed fairly and equitably. Comrades, this isn't just about policy or ticking boxes. This is about young people like Brian's son, who deserve the chance to live fulfilling lives, who deserve the opportunity to work, contribute and be valued. It's about opening as many doors as possible so that neurodivergent individuals are not left standing outside, excluded from the world the rest of us take for granted. The opportunity for change is in our hands. By supporting this motion, we can take a vital step towards building a fairer, more inclusive society, one where every individual, no matter their neurodiversity, has the chance to succeed. Congress, please support. I move.
Thank you. I call AEP to second. I'm then going to take Unison, but I think that's the only other speaker I'll be able to take, I'm afraid.
President, Congress. Kath Lowther from the AEP and an educational psychologist. We're proud to second this motion with the amendments as listed. I've had help with this speech from a wonderful group of neurodivergent educational psychologists. Thank you to them for the engaging conversations and the lessons learned. As the American journalist Harry Bloom said, neurodiversity is every bit as crucial for the human race as biodiversity is for life in general. Neurodiversity includes you. We are all neurodiverse. Every brain in this room is unique and different to the one next to it. Without our amazing array of humanity, how would we have progressed, innovated, and thrived as a species? Unfortunately, our world does not yet fully celebrate and embrace neurodiversity. Rather, it expects us to conform to a narrow definition of what it means to be human, to be useful to society, and to feed the capitalist machine. We are expected to be normal. But we know that a narrow normal leads to a narrow output. The cost is not only societal and planetary, but personal. Neurodivergent people in this world are relentlessly asked to go through excruciating contortions to fit in, often at great personal expense to their mental health, functioning, and thriving. We need a world where all our neurodiversity is properly celebrated, a world that recognizes and values the unique differences of neurodivergent individuals, strengths and talents, as well as individual needs, championing every person's inherent right to access work that is meaningful, in workplaces that are adaptive and inclusive. I finish with a personal story from a neurodivergent educational psychologist. Transition from education to the workplace was incredibly difficult. Most jobs, including temporary student jobs, require good interpersonal skills. But what that really means is good neurotypical interpersonal skills. Dabbling in factory work to avoid the interaction in service jobs wasn't a goer either because of the sensory overload. I thought I'd find my place in the world of work by doing something I was really interested in and got stuck into it. In hindsight, I was totally unprepared for the relentless masking needed to go through each day, blend in and not attract bullying, perhaps even more so than in education. This had a profound effect on my identity. Not knowing why I was different didn't help. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call Unison, please.
Congress, President Steve North from Unison, speaking in support of motion 47. Before I put myself forward to speak on this motion on behalf of Unison, I spoke with my son, Max. He's 9 years old. I wanted to make sure he was comfortable with me sharing some of his experiences and why I feel and we feel that this motion is so vital in ensuring that we tackle the challenges that exist in making sure that we give all young people the opportunity to flourish right across the spectrum of neurodiversity. So if you were to meet my son, Max is autistic. What we'd first come across to you is he's quite formal in his social interactions. He can appear shy, almost distant, almost direct when he does speak. If you were to spend a lot of time with him, you might need some time away from you after that, some time on his own. So you could get a certain impression of a young man. If you were only to stop there, though, what you wouldn't find out is that this is a young man who has the ability to complete a Rubik's Cube in less than 20 seconds, who last year, to the great pride of me and his mum, had a pamphlet that he produced for Valentine's Day taken into the Shakespeare archives in Stratford-upon-Avon, and who is someone who, when given the ability in his own time and space to form friendships and social interactions with other people, is incredibly good at it when it's done at his own pace and within his own time. Young people like Max and others, including Brian's son, I'm sure, from Aegis, when given the opportunity to flourish, can add so much in their relationships with other people, in our society generally, and absolutely within workplaces. But at the moment, the opportunities are not there, because workplaces approach young people from the spectrum of a neurotypical way of looking at things, and they think that's enough. But in doing so, not only do they disadvantage and disenfranchise young people like my son and many others, we also all lose out from the range of skills, experiences and talents that they can offer. Last Friday, bringing it to the present workplace, I was representing a Unison member in a care company in Salford. A man had just been diagnosed in his 40s with ADHD and is on his way to an autism diagnosis, explaining some of the difficulties and things that he'd failed to understand over the many years of his life. And we were sat there with managers and an HR professional. And I like to think I'm quite professional in the way that I do my job. But one of those managers showed immediately a complete blatant disregard for understanding what it had meant even for just that Unison member to come to that meeting and tell his story after all those years. And I found myself quite agitated. I had to tell the HR person that if that manager didn't leave the room, we'd be immediately lodging a claim for disability discrimination. We were going to go out for 2 minutes, we were going to come back in, and if the manager wasn't gone, we came back, we wouldn't continue. We came back in, the manager was gone, the company apologised. We have to challenge this where we can. We have to build workplaces for people like Max and others. We need to challenge the injustices that are taking place at the moment. So thank you for the motion, and let's do all we can. It's vital that we do. Thanks. Thank you, Congress.
Thanks for that, Steve. Okay, delegates, I've put motion 47 to the vote. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thank you, that carries. Congress, I want to give you early warning that tomorrow's security arrangements will be particularly tight. We will be insisting that all large bags, other than the Congress bags, and coats will need to be deposited in the cloakrooms. Delegates and visitors will not be able to bring drinks through the security checks at the Brighton Centre conference entrance, and no hot drinks will be allowed in the auditorium. I appreciate this may be inconvenient for delegates, but I'm sure you will understand the reasons behind these measures and will be fully cooperative. You may wish to leave extra time to gain access in the morning session in particular. Congress, I now have the results for the General Council Section D election, women representing unions with fewer than 200,000 members. The following are elected to serve on the General Council: Sue Ferns from Prospect, Kate Hudson, CWU, Annette Mansell-Green, BDA, and Alice Anglis, Musicians Union. Congratulations to those. All other General Council and GPC members have been elected unopposed. That concludes the Congress business for today. Congress is adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow. Thank you.